and that point being pretty obvious on her end.
Hey, Cecilia, one of the things that always happens before these, there's a little bit of like a working of the refs, right? They're sort of like setting expectations. We've seen from the Trump campaign them talking about a lot of different things. First saying the whole thing is rigged, then saying the moderator is brilliant. So kind of keeping everybody on their toes. What have we been seeing from the Clinton campaign in terms of kind of setting the expectations for tonight?
Oh, they have been playing the working the refs and working the jury, really. You know, they've been complaining essentially about moderators and fact-checking for the last few weeks. They are insistent upon moderators needing to fact-check over the course of these 3 debates that will happen, starting with tonight. And you know that the Donald Trump campaign is opposed to that. They think that moderators should just be there to ask the questions. And the Clinton campaign has been very vocal about that front. They've also been pretty critical about just the coverage leading up to it. You know, they want to make sure that journalists rate Donald Trump at the same level that they're rating Hillary Clinton on. They have said they don't believe that he will get the same set of questions that she will have because they feel like the bar is lower for him. We were talking about that earlier tonight. They feel like Donald Trump just has to basically show up and be presidential and not lie, and that he will be graded on a curve, and that for Donald Trump will essentially be a win. And they feel that's not fair. They think she's going to have to be commanding, she's going to have to be likable, and she's going to have to win arguments. She's got to do basically more than he does on that stage tonight. That's their argument.
And we see New York senior senator from New York, Chuck Schumer, walking into the hall behind you.
And Don King, did you see that?
Don King is here.
No,
you know it's fight night when Don King shows up. Cecilia Vega.
It's a rhinestone jacket.
It is.
Oh,
it's
just like Dan's.
Excellent. Yeah, I got one of those at home.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cecilia. Appreciate it. We really appreciate having you on. Would love to talk to you afterwards, of course. We do now, however, want to get it out to Kenneth Moton, who's at a viewing party in Washington, D.C. Although, Kenneth, stand by, because I want to see who gets out of this SUV here. And it's Donald Trump emerging from the vehicle and entering the debate hall on what will be unquestionably one of the biggest nights of his brief but colorful political career. Walking slowly into that hall, you gotta wonder, does a guy like Donald Trump get nervous?
Well, speaking of colorful, he's wearing a blue tie. I would have expected him to wear a big, powerful red tie.
Oh, is that right? Yeah. Red for power?
Red for power, red for your
red
party.
For Republican Party, yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so...
Well, we've been watching folks arrive on this camera earlier as well. We saw Mike Pence step out of a car and walk in before. I'm sure as more people come, we will bring you this camera so you can see everyone arriving. But Donald Trump is now in the building. We can officially say that. He has arrived for his first presidential debate against Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. We will see how that goes. And it looks like Kenneth Moton might be ready for us. What do you say, Dan?
The Eagle has landed, so let's get it over to Kenneth Moton, who, as we mentioned, is at a bar in D.C.
How did he get the bar beat?
I don't know. You want to be at a bar? Or you?
Yeah, Donald Trump's in the building there, and I'm in the bar. I think I'm pretty happy with where I am right now.
Everything is right in the world.
Guys, right, exactly. You know what? Hempstead, New York might be the center of the political universe, but you know what? In Washington, D.C., these folks are always talking politics. So we had to come to this bar called Teddy and the Bully Bar, named for the 26th president of the United States, but we're trying to find out who's going to be the 45th. And to help us with that is a person named Jonas, the bar manager for this place, because he actually has some special drinks, guys. You know, when we're talking politics, sometimes you just got to drink, especially this election cycle, with the candidates who have very high unfavorables. And so folks, I guess, have been driven to the bar a little bit. But if you drink responsibly tonight, know that here at Teddy and the Bully Bar, they've got a voter cocktail poll. Does that make sense? Well, we've got 2 drinks, right, Jonas? Tell me about them. We've got the Trump Tower and the Hillary M box. I think you guys know what that's all about. But so first, which one are you going to make for us first?
Let's do the Hillary one first.
All right, as you make the Hillary for us, tell us the main ingredients in this.
The main ingredient will be mixed vodka. We'll do an ounce and a half of it.
You've had this cocktail voter poll going since the summer, right?
I didn't hear you.
You've had it going since the summer, correct?
Yes, we had it since summer, yep.
And who's up right now?
The Hillary one is up.
The Hillary...
Double.
Okay, so they've got some similar ingredients, including the vodka being the same, but it's Hillary who's up.
Hillary.
Hillary's up, so that means I think we know how tonight's going to go because of your drinks, right?
That would decide elections because we did that last time and the Obama cocktail won. Obama became president. So hopefully we kind of predict the cocktails will tell us who's going to be a president. And yes, it might be Hillary.
It may be. And so what you got going in here now is this is what makes it really partisan here, which is the blue stuff you're about to put in there.
We got blue croissant. We do half an ounce of that. Before that it was Drambuie. And then we do another a quarter.
And just in case you don't know, the blue is what makes it the blue. Because so the Trump I hear is going to have a little red, right? Blue, red. I think we get the point.
We'll have a little bit of red in it because it's got Aperol in it.
All right, I'm distracting you here. Keep on making that drink for me.
And we do half an ounce of lime juice, fresh lime juice.
It's getting a little messy here.
We'll give it a good shake.
Representative of the election, getting a little messy. There we go. Got a little shaken, a little stirred.
Some fresh ice.
Look at that blue. Nothing says Democrats like blue vodka.
A little bit of club soda. Stir that.
You're shaking and stirring. Let me ask you, do you think Hillary Clinton's going to be shaken and stirred tonight? How's she going to do on that debate stage?
Hopefully she'll do well.
There you go, a little flag there with the HRC face on there, and there we go. All right, let's get to that Trump Tower.
To the Trump.
What do we got in it?
Same vodka, but this one will be infused with Earl Grey tea. So we do 3/4 of that. 3/4 of.
Let's put that anywhere. That top can go anywhere. Just throw it around.
3/4 of Dolem Blanc. And we do, to give it that little red color, we do Aperol.
Jonas, as you finish off this Trump Tower here, tell me, what are folks saying to you, these voters, these folks, these political watchers here in D.C., when they come into your bar?
What do you mean?
As about the election, what are they saying? Do they think it's going to be close? The reason I ask you that is because when it comes to the bar manager, people.
All right, that is Kenneth Moten digging deep for the secrets of that cocktail right there. This is some serious investigative journalism right there, live in Washington,
I'm getting
D.C.
a contact high watching this.
If you want to keep watching the rest of that cocktail being made, that's called the Trump Tower, I believe. If you're watching on an ABC News digital platform, you can hop over to Live Channel 6 to keep watching that drink being made.
It was orange.
Back here.
Did you notice that?
It was orange.
It was orange.
What are you saying, LZ?
I'm just saying it was orange.
It was orange.
You can do with that what you may.
LZ Granderson, I'm the Nevada's Dan Harris here in New York. We are now joined by Aaron Schrody. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
You are the youngest person ever to run for Congress. You ran at the ripe old age of 24. You couldn't even rent a car.
What was I thinking?
What
right?
were you thinking? Well, tell us about that. What brought you to run?
The decisions being made today will disproportionately affect who? Us, my generation, millennials, and we see not low representation, we see zero representation of that in Congress. There's no one under 30 right now. There's never been a woman under 30 elected. And so when so many of us are excluded, ignored, disenfranchised, turned off by the political system, we need to step up. We need to run.
So I can't ask you to be the voice of your generation, but I'm just curious. According to the latest ABC News Washington Post poll, almost 3 in 10 young voters, 28%, say they could switch their vote based on this debate. Yeah. Does that tell you that people are tuned in or not tuned in?
It tells me that in general, my generation is not loving either one of the major party candidates that we're seeing, and that we are really eager to hear the solutions and how they're relevant to us about education, about jobs, about family, and we're easily swayed because we're not so loyal to either one. So what I want people to listen for is real solutions and real track records of policy and not just showmanship and rhetoric.
Well, we should
on the
say you
stage.
ran as a Democrat.
I ran as a Democrat,
Right.
yes. Full
So
disclosure.
what are the problems that you want to hear solutions for? What's important to you? What was your platform?
Yeah. So for me, environmental and public health. I'm an environmentalist, the proud co-founder of Turning Green, a nonprofit 11 years ago. And climate change has to be part and parcel.
Wait. You started something 11 years ago?
You doing the math?
I'm just the math is just.
You're doing the math?
She got together with the other members of her Gymboree group, and they started a
nonprofit organization.
Yes.
Yeah, we were 5, okay? At the ripe old age of 13. But environmentalism, climate change, this is something that I'm really hoping does get raised in one of those 3 topics tonight. We are facing the ramifications of that and will continue to. Education. I think that when she joined forces with Bernie Sanders to put together a comprehensive education plan, making it debt-free, in dealing with loans and student loan repayment, that really excited a lot of members of my generation because we're going into the workforce feeling this burden that no generation has felt before us. There was a cartoon I saw, somebody blowing out their 100th birthday cake. Finally, I've paid off my student debt.
But she does have a lot of problems with young people, and she was, she had a tough race from Bernie Sanders. A lot of people didn't think this guy had a shot, and he drew a fervent response from young people. Why do you think that so many young people were attracted to him over her, and why she continues to have problems with this age cohort?
The movement was so inspirational, the way that he was able to activate our generation with those revolutionary ideas, with that vision of something different. He's been saying the same thing for decades. And that level of trustworthiness, what you hear, the word is overused, but authenticity.
Yeah.
People look at Hillary and they don't believe that she really stands behind what she's putting forth. You don't question. When Bernie Sanders says it, you know he believes it. Whether or not it's doable, whether or not it can be put into action, is another question. But people got so excited. That sort of candor, which I think my campaign represented too, answering questions that are asked to you, is very refreshing.
My question for the group is, does anybody think that a format like tonight is the correct format for Hillary Clinton to address a deficit in authenticity? 90 minutes in a debate format. Can she make a dent? Standing behind a lectern. Can she make a dent?
I'm so over the way that we continue to do this as well as the State of the Union. I mean, it ignores technology, ignores the way we consume information. When we run for office, we use all of the information to help get votes. But as we present ourselves to the voters, we still use these antiquated methods. So no, I don't think 2 candidates standing in front of a podium with a microphone talking nonstop for 90 minutes is the best way to get people who have short attention spans to tune into what you're trying to say.
And yet, millions of people are going to be watching what she has to say tonight, right? Across TV and live streams and Facebook and all of those things. So she has an opportunity, right, to do something, to make an impact, to deliver some kind of message. So what do you think she has to do to make it stick? For the people who haven't made up their minds, what does she need to do or say?
We hear it again and again. She has to be likable.
What does that mean?
I know.
What does
that even mean?
Do you like her?
I do.
Did you vote for Bernie or did you vote for her?
Yes.
You didn't like her like
$1
that.
million
You didn't like her all like that, did you?
We know the answer to the question.
Listen,
Let's
I
keep it real.
invited Hillary Clinton and Chelsea Clinton to my birthday party when I was 5 years old. They were in the White House.
Did they show up?
No, but they wrote me a really nice letter,
Oh, okay. All right.
politely declining the invitation.
That's nice.
Right now,
Was that on your mind when you pulled the lever for Bernie Sanders?
Next time you show up to my
that
birthday
little
party.
face right there. No, I am proud to be with her. I am proud to rally. It's not a choice in my mind right now. We are dealing with one candidate who is wholly, in my opinion, unqualified, unfit to be president. So I think that when I talk to my peers about how important it is to vote, to go to the polls, yes, are a lot of them considering Johnston or Stein? For sure. But that vote, and I am old enough to remember Nader. I was in the 4th grade. We did political cartoons at my school. We're advanced. But
You think?
I don't want my vote not to count. And to make my vote count, that's casting a vote for Hillary Clinton.
I'm curious, and not to put you on the spot,
No.
but there was something about a 75-year-old white guy from Vermont that inspired you and made you think that this is the person who's going to represent the millennial generation. What was the process for you to switch over to Hillary afterwards, and why haven't more of millennials done so? Because when you look at the numbers, they're still dragging their heels.
Yeah. Oh no, for sure. For me, there was no choice. The rhetoric coming from Donald Trump, the way that he is fueling hate speech, the alt-right, this rise is unacceptable. So I don't feel that, and I understand people not being totally captured by Hillary Clinton. But when you put them side by side, we've two completely different bars that we're holding people accountable to. So it's not a choice. If you were for Sanders, please, wherever you are, listen, you have to move to Hillary Clinton. The fact that people would even consider jumping to vote for Trump or not voting at all, this is a privilege that we have right now. And she's the only candidate for my generation.
Back to LZ's point, though, do you think this format, right, like this debate, is this going to move the needle for people who haven't made up their minds?
There's a lot more people watching this debate of my generation than have ever watched it before, and I think most of them are tuning in on their tablets, on their phones, and on their computers. So maybe that's going to change it. I know that when Facebook and Twitter do get involved and we see the icons pop up after the hashtags and we see Donald Trump buying Snapchat filters, that's going to engage us on a new level. So I think using this format and making it more digital and more interactive is better. But no, this is not that sort of screen, I watch, you talk, you stand, what appeals to my generation. You got to get out there. And I think that the more and more we see them on the trail, showing up like she did last week at Temple University to deliver a brilliant speech to millennials, having Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren out there on college campuses and in towns with young people, is how she's going to win the millennial vote.
You know, you just dropped three names in Sanders, Clinton, and Warren, who are well over 65 years old. Who do you see as the future of the Democratic Party, based on the fact that you see the superstars as being that old?
Yeah. You know, Tulsi Gabbard is one who I'm hugely inspired by. I think it took huge courage to do what she did in breaking from her party. She is right now one of the youngest women in Congress. She's a proud woman. She's a former service member. I have tremendous respect for her. There are people across the aisle. Elise Stefanik's a Republican. She was the youngest woman ever elected to Congress. More willing to work across the aisle. That excites me. And I think that's where you're going to see these rising superstars and these new coalitions.
There are a lot of young people like Cory Booker as well.
Yeah,
Cory's our age.
Corey's 47.
Yeah. Oh, he's 47?
Yeah, Cory's our age. He just looks younger because he uses cocoa butter.
Well, 47 is younger than 75.
Well, but he's also unbelievably active on social media and engaging that demographic. And he was elected to city council at 29. Right. So he's been there in the trenches doing the work for quite some time. But you're seeing wonderful people running at the local level as well that we need more of.
Who do you fear? Besides Donald Trump. I mean, when you look down the pipeline, you're looking at 2020, you're looking at the down ticket, which candidates actually make you more uncomfortable as you consider more and more of the things they talk about?
Yeah, Ted Cruz, because I don't actually know and feel like I have any clue what he will do if elected to the presidency.
All right, well, we will see what plays out on the debate stage later tonight. LZ's got a lot more questions, I can tell.
I do.
Let's go back out
We'll
to
keep her
Hofstra.
around there. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for joining us.
Bring some of those drinks that we just saw in the previous segment.
Yeah.
Tom Yamas is out
orange
there.
ones?
Tom, I'm sorry to bring you into this conversation, buddy. Tom's out there live at Hofstra with the Trump campaign. Tom, we talked a lot about the preparation the candidates have been going through, how we've been able to lock down how Mr. Trump has been preparing for tonight.
Well, the first thing he didn't do was he didn't do any mock debates. There was no one playing Hillary Clinton. We do know that his campaign manager wanted him to study previous Hillary Clinton debates going back from her Senate campaigns, but also her debates against President Obama. They uploaded them to his iPad. It's still unclear if he ever looked at those. We do know that he was doing a lot of question and answer sessions, especially this morning. Basically, Trump's debate prep was sitting around with some of his most trusted aides, who are also some of his closest friends, and basically just shooting out topics, and then Trump would answer. We also know that he studied some of the primary debates and his performances as well. But for the most part, it wasn't the deep, intense prepping that we've heard about from the Hillary Clinton campaign. I was texting with his campaign manager earlier today, Kellyanne Conway, and I said, what was your last piece of advice to your boss before he takes that stage? And it was, be yourself. So we'll see what happens tonight. Donald Trump, definitely a lot of eyes are going to be watching him to see how his temperament is tonight. Does he lose his cool like he has in the past in the primaries when he went after Rand Paul's looks in that classic moment where he told Rand Paul on the stage, I've never made fun of your looks, and trust me, there's a lot of subject matter there. Or when he talked about the size of his hands and then alluded to other parts of his anatomy with Marco Rubio. So it'll be unclear if he takes the debate to that level. If he does, Hillary Clinton likely will get the upper hand, but Trump has tried to stay on message the last few weeks. He's tried to talk about policy. Rudy Giuliani, who's been coaching him, has said those policy speeches are actually debate prep because it gets Trump in that same mind frame. So we'll see what happens, guys.
Hey, Tom, I got to ask you, this is Dan. You and Cecilia have been doing a great job of reporting on what the campaigns are telling you about the preparation process for this debate. But to what extent do you think the information they're putting out there could be misinformation? You know, is Donald Trump trying to play rope-a-dope here by saying, oh, I didn't do any prep, et cetera, and then in fact actually he's done a ton of prep and he can come on and with expectations so low he can outperform?
Yeah, could it all be spin? Could we just be kind of regurgitating the spin that political consultants and aides tell reporters to kind of game the system? Possibly. I'll tell you, Dan, why I don't think that's the case this time. If you read anything about Donald Trump's history, if you read the books, if you look at the articles going all the way back to the 80s, if you listen to people who have done deals with him, they will tell you time and time again, Donald Trump doesn't deal in details. He likes to get things done very quickly, whether it be buying the Plaza Hotel or buying some other $1 million property. He likes to get things really quick. In fact, there was one famous story where he was buying this big building in Manhattan, and he called the attorney who was selling the building, and he said, just tell me what's wrong with it, and I'll pay you full price. I just want you to be honest with me. And that essentially was the deal. He didn't go through the financials of the building. He didn't inspect the building. That's how he wanted to buy. And a lot of his aides say it's the same way. He kind of wants the cooked tour of things. He's very off the cuff. Some people have called it foreign diplomacy improvisation. That's the way he's been his entire campaign. And for him, the way he looks at it is it's worked for him. So why is he going to change?
Tom Yamas, who's done an excellent job covering the Trump campaign for many, many months now. Tom, thank you. And we're looking at the screen at people filing into the debate hall. There's Reince Priebus. We saw a shot of New York Governor Andrew Cuomo as well. Reince Priebus, of course, is the head of the Republican Party. He's had a very interesting cycle, to say the least. We also have standing by ABC News Chief White House correspondent John Karl, who's been doing a yeoman's work covering this campaign this year, as he's done many, many years throughout his tenure here at ABC. John, just give us a gut sense. How do you think which Donald Trump do you think is going to show up tonight? The Donald Trump that the Democrats fear will show up, the mellow one, or the fighter that we saw in the Republican primary debates over and over?
You know, I watched very closely as he arrived here just a short while ago, and my read on his body language, the way he came out of the car, the way he walked into this hall, was it seemed to be a subdued Donald Trump. He actually wasn't even wearing his red power tie yet. We've never really seen him out on the campaign trail or anywhere without that red tie. I'm sure the tie will be on by the time he takes the podium, but he seemed relaxed. He seemed, to use the word, mellow. I suspect that at least for the beginning of this debate, we will see a restrained Donald Trump, a Donald Trump that is trying to appear presidential. I think it's very similar to the Donald Trump that we saw when he went down to Mexico and met with the president of Mexico. He stood podium by podium with the president of another country, a country he's had some issues with, and he was quite restrained. His tone was restrained. His words were restrained. I think that is the game plan, in as much as Donald Trump has a game plan. The really thing, what I can't tell you though, Dan, is does that last for 90 minutes? I have no idea.
So I'm sure that my compadres here will have some questions. I just want to point out who's on the screen here. I believe that's Sheldon Adelson, a casino magnate who gives a lot of money to Republican causes.
Seat, Dan.
And yeah, he does have a good seat. And with him, of course, Rudy Giuliani, former mayor of New York City and a close advisor to Donald Trump, alongside his wife there. And we're also seeing shots before of, I believe, Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google.
I think so.
An interesting room
And well
here.
before that, we saw Mark Cuban come in as well. So it's quickly filling up in there.
So I spent some time walking around just before I came here, and I got to tell you just a couple little snapshots of what I witnessed. First off, Don King walking in, and all of these people right at the debate stage, right in front of the podiums, pausing, bringing Don King over for selfies. I don't think we've ever seen anything like that before at a presidential debate, certainly not a general election debate. The other thing I saw just over here off to the side as I was coming up to our camera position was Donna Brazile, the chairwoman of the Democratic Party, with a big hug for Chris Christie. Laughs, hugs, all, there you go. So this has been the most intensely partisan, bitterest campaign we have ever witnessed, and there you have one of Trump's strongest supporters and the chairwoman of the Democratic Party, enjoying a moment of levity here before this huge moment on that debate stage.
John, I'm sorry, LZ, go ahead.
Hey, John, it's LZ here. Just a quick question for you. There have been rumors that Donald Trump may pay a visit to the spin room. Do you have a sense of whether or not those rumors are true? And also, do you think that he's going to be as a welcome sight as he was when he used to go into the spin room during the primaries? Because he has a very different relationship now with journalists now than he did back then.
I have to tell you, I think that if Mr. Trump goes into the spin room, that there will be some interest. I think he may attract a camera or two. I think a journalist or two may want to go up and ask him a question. I suspect we may see a scene very similar to what we've seen during the primaries. He went into the spin room after every single debate during the primaries, and it was always a massive circus. Everybody crowding around him, people getting trampled. They towards the, as he got Secret Service protection, it got a little bit more organized and a little bit less chaotic. But yes, I do expect, we haven't been officially notified, but I do expect that he will go into the spin room, and I do expect that even with the tensions between the press and with the Trump campaign, there will be a very similar reaction to what we've seen when he's done it previously.
And that will be a moment. Let me just pick up on a word you used, John, circus. Presidential politics for time immemorial have there's been a circus component to this process. But what you were describing earlier, Don King in a rhinestone jacket posing in front of the podium, Mark Cuban in the room, reality star on the stage. Do you think, and you've been covering politics for a while, not that you're an old man, but you started as a young man, so you've been covering politics for a while. Does it worry you at all, the sort of tone and tenor, not only the partisan nature this year, but also sort of the circus like atmosphere, which is basically, we have to say, coming from both sides, because it was Hillary Clinton who brought in, who was bringing in Mark Cuban. So does any of that worry you, given your experience in politics?
Well, there are two things here. One is the good news. This debate, we expect, will have possibly as many as 100 million people watching. In other words, this looks like it will be the most widely watched debate in the history of presidential debates, going back to when Nixon and Kennedy took the stage in the very first debate. So that, as a political journalist, you relish that. You relish the fact that there are so many people tuning in and interested in what's happening here. The downside is exactly what you mentioned. It's the circus-like atmosphere. It's the triviality of much of what has transpired during the campaign. The lack of real detailed substance on the core issues, on the direction the country will be taking. It's been, it's been a reality show in many senses, and I think that Donald Trump's obviously been a big part of that. He is a tremendous showman, but certainly his opponents have had to play into that and follow that as well. And as you mentioned, I think it's a very good point. The decision to invite Mark Cuban and to announce the decision that Mark Cuban, reality TV star, nemesis of Donald Trump, the decision to invite him and give him a front row seat was, of course, a decision made by the Clinton campaign. So they are playing into this as well. So it is a bit concerning. I think what more concerns me, though, Dan, is when you go out and you see so many Americans at rallies on each side who seem to have no faith in the underlying system and say they will have no faith in the results of this election if their candidate loses. That's deeply troubling. They see the other side as not simply political opponents, but as, essentially evil, as the country either, becomes great again or it falls apart. And you hear that from partisans on both sides. That's why that moment, I wish we could broadcast it out. I wish, I did snap a couple photos, so maybe I'll send you one, Dan, we can put on Twitter. But to see Chris Christie, and Donna Brazile greeting each other like they were, lifelong friends in the midst of this campaign.
Yeah, I mean, that's why people reacted to Michelle Obama hugging former President George W. Bush. But that is so rare as to be remarkable, right? I mean, it is not the norm. And what you're talking about with people questioning the legitimacy of the outcome, that is really troublesome. And this story will not end in early November after the election, almost certainly.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
we're going to watch the next
And
chapter in this story unfold
Yeah.
tonight. John, thank you so much for being with us live there from Hofstra University. You can see Governor Mike Pence has now entered the hall. There's a live picture of him. Looks like maybe signing some autographs, taking some pictures with some... there's your selfie.
Selfies.
There you
right.
go.
Yes.
Another part of the seriousness of this campaign. And this is a man who's going to be on the hot seat himself very soon in a debate against Tim Kaine. We'll be covering that right here on ABC. Let's see who's pulling up. Is this perhaps Hillary Clinton?
Is that a conversion van? It's not like a...
This is the room where the VIPs enter. We saw Donald Trump pull up here a while ago, as has been remarked, sans his traditional red power tie. And emerging here, former President Bill Clinton.
There we go.
We didn't know whether he was going to come tonight. There was some question on the reporting here, but here he is. I imagine he'll be front and center supporting his wife. What a
Oh, and
And
speaking
here she
of,
is.
looks like they've arrived together. So
in red
now,
herself.
Power red. I don't know why red is the color of power. It just... Some fashionista decided that's what it is. Maybe it was
Also
Miranda Priestley or someone.
It's also the color they wave at angry bulls in stadiums. But I just, as she strides in there, I just can't help but think this is one of the biggest nights of her life. And to be alongside a former president who happens to be her spouse, and to think about the dynamics in that marriage and how she was the spouse for so many years when he was doing this, when he was debating, when his political career was on the line. And tonight it's her political career on the line, with the polls as tight as they are, with a wily and unpredictable opponent who she's going to be facing for 90 minutes on that stage right there. The stakes could not be higher for her.
They could not be higher, and the interest couldn't be higher either. I think we've got we're honored to be able to bring in now ABC's own Cokie Roberts, who's live right now in the Washington, D.C. Bureau of ABC News. Cokie, thank you so much for being with us. We've been talking about the enormous interest in tonight's debate, the record numbers of people expected to watch. What do you think they're going to see unfold on that stage right there tonight?
Well, if what they're expecting to see is fireworks, I think they're likely to be disappointed. But I have to tell you, I've been listening to you, and I am amused at you talking about young John Carl covering so many.
How did I know you were going to needle us for that,
So many elections.
Cokie?
Could I talk to you about the Adams-Jefferson election? I didn't cover it, but I might as well have. And the truth is, we've had circus-like behavior in our politics from the beginning. People have always enjoyed political campaigns. It was really only in the latter half of the 20th century that they became subdued and somewhat boring. It was always people turning out, all kinds of scurrilous things said. In fact, when John Adams was running against Jefferson and Charles Cotesworth Pinckney was his running mate, Pinckney had returned from ambassadorship in Great Britain, and the newspapers, the Republican newspapers, wrote that he had come back with 4 women, 2 for him and 2 for Adams. And Adams said, if it's true, I got cheated out of my 2. So, this stuff has been going on for a very, very long time. And people used to show up at rallies, and there were literally circus acts performing. So this is very much in our tradition.
Thank you for making us feel better. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. And we know
Now,
you
we haven't had a reality TV star running for president before. That is different.
That's true.
And we haven't had a woman running for president as a major nominee before. So we are making history either way.
Cokie, last time we chatted, we were hanging out a little bit at the RNC over the summer. Your view, your analysis of the ways the polls were going, and just your gut sense was that Donald Trump was really in the stronger position as we head into November. Do you still feel that way?
Yes, I do. And for this year is change. We hardly ever give a party a 3rd term. We did it in '88 with George H.W. Bush, and with Roosevelt, he gave himself a 3rd term. But normally we don't do that. You have 70% of the people saying the country's going in the wrong direction, even though unemployment is down, consumer confidence is up, all of that. So you would normally see a non-Democrat be elected, but we haven't had someone like Donald Trump before. So that's why tonight is important, because what he has to do is show people that he's not scary, and that they can imagine him as president of the United States. And I think that's exactly what he's going to do tonight. You know, in 1980, when Ronald Reagan had his one debate against Jimmy Carter 1 week before the election, the Carter people had been dying to debate Reagan. They thought they were so much smarter than he was, and that he wouldn't know policy and all of that. And he stood on that stage for an hour and a half, Reagan did, with the President of the United States, and he was charming and friendly and not scary. And the next day, I went to a neighborhood that I had scoped out with the Census Bureau in Pittsburgh, a neighborhood of people we would now call Reagan Democrats. At the time, we just called them Democrats. And every single solitary white voter I talked to said exactly the same thing, which was, you know, I always kind of liked Ronald Reagan, but I was a little bit afraid of him. I thought he was too old. I thought he was a little trigger happy. I was nervous about him, but he stood on that stage for an hour and a half with the President of the United States last night, and I liked him, and I'm voting for him. And Carter, by the way, went into that debate at 47-39 in the Gallup poll. And by a week later, it was a Reagan landslide with Carter getting 49 electoral votes. So these debates can make a huge difference.
Yeah, Koki, I was curled up today on my couch, or Saturday, watching C-SPAN of all the previous debates that they were airing.
You're just as big a nerd as I am.
Can we talk about what a window that is into LZ's soul?
With that being said, I was really shocked that in '76, to listen to Carter and Ford debate, that they were talking about things like stagnation in wages, energy independence, what was then sort of like terrorism. Like, it seemed as if it was the exact same conversation we're having 40 years later. Did I overlook something, or again, with your experience, have you heard the same conversations over and over and over again?
Well, sure, because basically what the big issues of a campaign are going to be are the economy and national security, and then with side issues having to do with some social issues, or if there's a big upset about crime or something like that. And of course, by '76, we had gotten past, we thought, the horrible days of the 60s where the race issue was such an enormous part of our politics. And here it is again, LZ.
And Koki, before we let you go, there's something sort of beautifully full circle about this debate tonight. Today, the 26th of September, is 56 years to the day that the very first presidential debate was on television, the Nixon-Kennedy debate. And I think over on Live Channel 8, for folks out there joining us on an ABC News digital platform, you can actually watch that debate stream there. I'm just curious, Koki, I want to hear your thoughts, because it's so much over the years now, it's become about how the message is delivered in this televised format, and much less so about what the message actually is. So I'd just love to hear your take on that and how you think it'll play out tonight.
Well, of course, famously, after that debate, people who had heard it on the radio thought that Nixon had won. And it was his appearance, he was apparently ill, and he was sweating and looked terrible, and Kennedy was cool and handsome and smiling, and just captured the American people, particularly after 8 years of a very solid but old president, Dwight Eisenhower. And so he was change. He was not the vice president of the sitting president, and he was this handsome, as I say, charming, smiling, funny. He always had a great sense of humor, guy. And so that debate really was the beginning of personality coming through on television and making an enormous difference in voters' perceptions of candidates.
No, Koki, I couldn't help but notice you used the word handsome like 3 times in describing.
Because he really was.
I'm not mad at you.
She's sharing her memories as she remembered. Okay, just leave her alone. Thank you, Koki.
Koki, you're amazing, and I hope that we'll be able to talk to you later. Thank you very much for joining us.
Great.
We really appreciate it. And you're especially being able to provide that much context. We know you didn't cover the Lincoln-Douglas debates in person, but giving us historical context is really comforting and really, really interesting. Just to quickly point out that if you're watching us on an ABC News device, 2 things to look for if you want to switch over to one of the other live feeds. On live feed 8, as Amna mentioned earlier, actually we're going to be playing the debate between, there it is, Nixon and Kennedy.
How cool is that?
Pretty cool. And this is the one where people thought because Nixon didn't want to wear makeup, that he lost to the younger and more handsome JFK, who was wearing makeup. And then on live feed 6, there is something interesting going on. We have an illustrator who's drawing pictures of 3 hosts for your live feed tonight. There she is. Hi.
Wow, those are some
Can you make me taller, please? I think that's me on the left.
People. I think it is you on the left.
That's Amna in the middle and LZ on the right.
Yes.
I like my luscious lips. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. And so...
Dang, you didn't have any lips in that photo. Did you see that?
I don't quite know what to say about that picture. No, I just have a tooth. Is that a tooth?
Into silence. Is that a tooth?
Is this one large buck tooth? I can't tell. We can't...
Dan, you look so excited in that. Look at, and cheeks.
Oh, got cheeks.
Rosy cheeks.
Yeah, I like that.
Little definition in the chin. Your
I like
hair
your lashes, Amna. Look at your lashes.
My lashes are on point. Shout out to the ABC makeup department.
All right, because I'm sick of my one large buck tooth, let's get it over to Walt Hickey from 538. Walt, are you with us?
Yeah, how's it going?
Right there. I thought you were by your remote. You're actually sitting right here. Walt, that was embarrassing.
No,
I apologize.
I got a real kick out of the previously recorded on the Nixon Kennedy debate.
As if somebody would be like, "This is
you
this
need
happening
to make
live?"
it clear. You got to signpost it.
Well, we're going into this evening with, by the way, awesome shoes. Can we see the shoes? The red, white, and blue.
I do want to point the shoe game.
Yeah,
right
the shoe
here
game here is
is
strong.
I'm trying to
the
hang.
shoe game is
Yeah,
pretty
I'm
good.
not even playing the game.
You are.
I'm not even playing the game. I didn't even know Walt was in the room, so clearly I have a lot of deficiencies. So just walk us through the state of the polls right now. We all know the polls are tightening, but how serious is it really for Hillary Clinton? And how did she go from what a lot of people were talking about a landslide after the DNC?
Yes.
How did she go from that to this?
Yeah, so after the DNC and the RNC, so Trump was ahead in the polls after the RNC, right? There's an instantaneous bump. We have a polls plus model that can accommodate for that, but if you're just tracking the polls, if you're just averaging them, you're going to see a big bump and a dilation before and after. The thing that we need to look at now is that there's been a steady trend over the past couple weeks of this race very much converging to an average. What we're seeing currently right now, if you look at the averaged poll rating for each of
by the state of New York, by the county of Nassau, by the town of Hempstead, and the village of Hempstead. And finally, in terms of general thank yous, I thank the many law enforcement agencies who work so well together, coordinated, and planned one of the most difficult security events in modern times. Thank you, law enforcement agencies. I would like to ask you to join me in especially recognizing 2 generous supporters who helped Hofstra in significant part fund the expenses of this debate. The first, I am proud to say, is our debate sponsor. He is a son, he's an alumnus of the university, and he's currently the vice chair of its board of trustees. Join me in thanking David S. Mack. David? Secondly, I ask you to join me in recognizing now an ex-trustee, trustee emeritus, also a graduate of Hofstra University, former CEO of Pantone, our debate benefactor, Lawrence Herbert. Larry? By the way, Larry has also recently generously endowed the Herbert School of Communication. Thank you, Larry. So, a lot has changed at Hofstra between the debates of 2012 and debates of 2016. If I had to mention all of them, I would have to go to the podium. Just too many to relate, but I'm willing to have dinner or lunch with anybody who wants to know everything that has happened. But I do want to mention two special things that have occurred. One is we just, a few months ago, opened the Peter Calico School of Government, Public Policy, and International Relations. That school has been generously endowed by Peter S. Calico, who is also here tonight. Peter, would you join me in welcoming Peter? The point of this school and Peter's motivation was to ensure that Hofstra University retains its status as one of the most prestigious places at which to study the American presidency. And this is just one example of the kind of program we have. The other thing I will mention about what has happened recently in the university is that we have formed or created a Center for Entrepreneurship. And what's special about that center at Hofstra is that they will benefit not only from their own resources, but from the resources of our law school, our business school, our School of Engineering and Applied Science, and that is, we have altruistic, most public-spirited college students in America. You cannot spend time with these young people and feel pessimistic about the future. You spend time with these young people, you have to feel optimistic about the nation's future. And we host this debate and the past two debates for them. So there were 7,500 students who signed up for the seats available to Hofstra students in this debate hall tonight. 7,500 out of 11,000 students. And I have to say that every single student, I say this with pride, Hofstra pride, every single student who has a ticket and is sitting in this debate hall tonight, who is eligible to vote, has already registered to vote, and promises to vote in the November 8th election. That's why we do this. I will close simply by emphasizing once again how proud the university is to play this very small part in our nation's history. Thank you.
I'm going to add one logistical thing that I forgot. Right at 9 o'clock, you're going to hear a lot of noise from behind you. The networks go on the air at 9 o'clock. So you'll hear their introductions. Don't worry, they will get quiet in about 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll go forward. Thank you very much.
There's one additional piece of housekeeping, and that is if you could please turn off your cell phones or anything else, pagers, whatever. No use of cell phones or photography while this is going on. If you could do that now, that would be great. I'd like you to welcome Melania Trump and former President Bill Clinton. If you could take your seats again, thank you very much. We are grateful this evening to have as moderator Lester Holt, the anchor of NBC Nightly News. You can welcome him now.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you. Good evening. Nice to see every seat is filled. There was some question whether we'd have enough interest for tonight, but I guess we've taken care of that. Mrs. Trump, President Clinton, good to see you. Good to see everyone. That thud you heard backstage was the sound of my knees buckling when Frank mentioned a potential audience of 100 million. But it's just us tonight. And in a moment, it'll just be the three of us and hopefully just the two of them. That's what it's all about. As you can imagine, this is not an easy job, so I'm going to ask your help tonight. You heard the admonition, if you could please refrain from clapping and booing or reacting in any audible way. That would make my job a lot easier, and I know the American public would appreciate it because we really want to hear what they have to say tonight, and I'm happy to be the one facilitating that conversation. So what's going to follow are some awkward moments of silence. I'm going to take my seat here in my office for the evening, and I'll give you a 1-minute warning when we're about to come up on the air. And then no fancy lights or musical opens. We just go to it. So thank you for being here. I hope you enjoy the debate.
Okay, so right here, Mr. Holt, spare IST, that knob for turning it on. This is your spare lavalier. Okay. If it goes wrong, someone will come out to take care of it. It'll probably be me.
Got it.
All right, you're good to go.
Thank you.
And he's going to ask a question, and the candidates get 2 minutes to answer, and they can address one another.
Now, on the topics, we know that the moderator basically selects the topics, right? They decide what the issues are going to be, how the questions are going to be framed.
We actually have some considerable data about what the audience wants to hear. Pew Research Center did ask people in a 100-minute debate, how many minutes do you want to apply to each of these topics, right? And on average, people wanted 15 minutes devoted to terrorism and keeping the country safe from terrorism, 12 minutes for economic growth, 11 minutes for the deficit, 11 minutes for healthcare, foreign policy and immigration. And this is interesting.
And
because
race? Not
yes. That's a different question according to the Pew Research. They only had a different 10, but again,
race and policing.
Everything's not about race, Dan.
Sorry, I can't help it.
I didn't design the
I always throw that card, but it is. I mean, nonetheless, it is dominating the news. Race and policing. I just have to imagine it's going to come up.
It is one of the top topics on Facebook alone that they've been tracking over the last week. Racism has been the number one issue.
Yeah, the polling backs that up as well. A different Pew Research Center report asked people, do you consider this a big problem? Do you consider this a thing worthy of investigation and conversation? And when it came to race relations and relations with ethnic groups, 51% of Hillary Clinton supporters, 48% of Donald Trump supporters, so we agree on something. Thought on that.
That's beautiful. But here's another question coming from Facebook, and Elsie, I'd love to hear what you have to say about this. That's what people want to hear about. People in Facebook are asking, what do you think will actually be the biggest issue that we hear about?
Two things, emails and terrorism.
You think?
I think no matter what, particularly Donald Trump, he's going to make sure that he reminds people why they don't trust Hillary Clinton. Benghazi, and the emails. Those are his two calling cards, especially when the conversation starts to veer into the weeds of policy as it relates to foreign affairs in the Middle East, because he's not that deep. But he does have those two bullets he can fire over and over again. And what they've proven over the past 365 days, they've been very effective.
The balance for him is to do that, to throw those jabs while acting presidential, because he wants to send the message tonight that he can be president. People don't need to be scared of him. We're just a few minutes. We just passed the 9 o'clock hour. The bears repeating that we are just a few minutes away from a really momentous occasion.
What's going on?
This is, I'll explain just because LZ's a little slow.
New Orleans Saints at Atlanta Falcons. Right?
Something like that. Something like that. While I get heckled here, I will try to explain to the audience that we are moments away from the first female ever nominated to be president by a major American party, Hillary Clinton, up against a former reality star and alleged billionaire and real estate magnate who has no political experience.
He's got a year plus under his
that's
belt.
right. No
And
elected office experience, but he does have a lot of political experience. You're correct about that. He has now won the Republican nomination.
That's right.
So he's had an extraordinary run. He has galvanized people in some extraordinary ways. So we are seeing two really interesting people who also are two of the least liked presidential candidates in the history of polling, who are about to go head-to-head in what has already been an extremely nasty campaign, but they haven't actually had this amount of face time since Donald Trump got married and Hillary Clinton was there. So if you think about all the twists and turns that have led up to this moment, it boggles the mind.
A lot has happened. And there's a lot at stake. It bears repeating. The polls have been tightening.
Yes.
The longer this race goes on, who knows what's going to happen after tonight, but there's a lot at stake for both of the candidates.
Absolutely. Again, we've got millions of people, again, 17% of the electorate not behind one of these two candidates. What's very, very interesting about it, Reuters Ipsos poll found out a couple things about them. For instance, 60% of them are women. About 54% of them are over the age of 55. Most of them don't think that the country's going in the right direction. So you've got a very interesting blend of traits that typically connote Hillary Clinton support and traits that typically do Trump support.
What does that mean? The country's not going in the right direction. Like, what exactly are they focused in on that's giving them that opinion? Because when you look at the 2012 debate, and Mitt Romney gave his list of things that he would be able to accomplish within 8 years that have all been accomplished in 4 years, what exactly are people saying that is leading the country in the wrong direction?
I don't have the crosstabs on that, but we do know that folks who answer that question in the affirmative, that the country's on the wrong track, typically do support Trump. And when you ask people who support Trump, what do you think is our big problems in this country? 2/3 say immigration, slightly less say terrorism in the United States, right? He does typically better when you ask people, who do you think will do better on the economy? So there's a lot of unease, right, about what's going on in the world outside, what's going on at the borders, and what's going on in the U.S. economy. Now, granted, we've had a rather solid recovery, all things considered, if you look at those numbers, but there's still skepticism. Not all parts of this country have benefited from the recovery from the recession as much as other parts have.
Unquestionably true. We're fewer than 30 seconds away from this debate. Just think about this. As divided as the country is right now, we're going to have, by some estimates, 100 million people tuning in to watch this debate. So this is, in some ways, in a divided country, a moment of unity. And here we go with Lester Holt, the moderator.
Good evening from Hofstra University in Hempstead, New York. I'm Lester Holt, anchor of NBC Nightly News. I want to welcome you to the first presidential debate. The participants tonight are Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. This debate is sponsored by the Commission on Presidential Debates, a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. The commission drafted tonight's format, and the rules have been agreed to by the campaigns. The 90-minute debate is divided into 6 segments, each 50 minutes long. We'll explore 3 topic areas tonight: achieving prosperity, America's direction, and securing America. At the start of each segment, I will ask the same lead-off question to both candidates, and they will each have up to 2 minutes to respond. From that point until the end of the segment, we'll have an open discussion. The questions are mine and have not been shared with the commission or the campaigns. The audience here in the room has agreed to remain silent so that we can focus on what the candidates are saying. I will invite you to applaud, however, at this moment as we welcome the candidates. Democratic nominee for President of the United States, Hillary Clinton, and Republican nominee for President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Good luck to you. Good to see you. Thank you. Mr. Trump, good luck to you. Well, I don't expect us to cover all the issues of this campaign tonight, but I remind everyone there are 2 more presidential debates scheduled. We are going to focus on many of the issues that voters tell us are most important, and we're going to press for specifics. I am honored to have this role, but this evening belongs to the candidates and just as important to the American people. Candidates, we look forward to hearing you articulate your policies and your positions, as well as your visions and your values. So, let's begin. We're calling this opening segment Achieving Prosperity, and central to that is jobs. There are 2 economic realities in America today. There's been a record 6 straight years of job growth, and new census numbers show incomes have increased at a record rate after years of stagnation. However, income inequality remains significant, and nearly half of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Beginning with you, Secretary Clinton, why are you a better choice than your opponent to create the kinds of jobs that will put more money into the pockets of American workers?
Well, thank you, Lester, and thanks to Hofstra for hosting us. The central question in this election is really what kind of country we want to be and what kind of future we'll build together. Today is my granddaughter's 2nd birthday, so I think about this a lot. First, we have to build an economy that works for everyone, not just those at the top. That means we need new jobs, good jobs, with rising incomes. I want us to invest in you. I want us to invest in your future. That means jobs in infrastructure, in advanced manufacturing, in innovation and technology, clean renewable energy, and small business, because most of the new jobs will come from small business. We also have to make the economy fairer. That starts with raising the national minimum wage and also guarantee, finally, equal pay for women's work. I also want to see more companies do profit sharing. If you help create the profits, you should be able to share in them, not just the executives at the top. And I want us to do more to support people who are struggling to balance family and work. I've heard from so many of you about the difficult choices you face and the stresses that you're under. So let's have paid family leave, earned sick days. Let's be sure we have affordable child care and debt-free college. How are we going to do it? We're going to do it by having the wealthy pay their fair share and close the corporate loopholes. Finally, we tonight are on the stage together, Donald Trump and I. Donald, it's good to be with you. We're going to have a debate where we are talking about the important issues facing our country. You have to judge us. Who can shoulder the immense, awesome responsibilities of the presidency? Who can put into action the plans that will make your life better? I hope that I will be able to earn your vote on November 8th.
Secretary Clinton, thank you. Mr. Trump, the same question to you. It's about putting more money into the pockets of American workers. You have up to 2 minutes.
Thank you, Lester. Our jobs are fleeing the country. They're going to Mexico. They're going to many other countries. You look at what China is doing to our country in terms of making our product. They're devaluing their currency, and there's nobody in our government to fight them. And we have a very good fight, and we have a winning fight, because they're using our country as a piggy bank to rebuild China, and many other countries are doing the same thing. So we're losing our good jobs, so many of them. When you look at what's happening in Mexico, a friend of mine who builds plants said it's the 8th wonder of the world. They're building some of the biggest plants anywhere in the world, some of the most sophisticated, some of the best plants. With the United States, as he said, not so much. So Ford is leaving. You see that, their small car division leaving. Thousands of jobs, leaving Michigan, leaving Ohio. They're all leaving, and we can't allow it to happen anymore. As far as child care is concerned and so many other things, I think Hillary and I agree on that. We probably disagree a little bit as to numbers and amounts and what we're going to do, but perhaps we'll be talking about that later. But we have to stop our jobs from being stolen from us. We have to stop our companies from leaving the United States, and with it, firing all of their people. All you have to do is take a look at Carrier Air Conditioning in Indianapolis. They left, fired 1,400 people. They're going to Mexico. So many, hundreds and hundreds of companies are doing this. We cannot let it happen. Under my plan, I'll be reducing taxes tremendously, from 35% to 15% for companies, small and big businesses. That's going to be a job creator like we haven't seen since Ronald Reagan. It's going to be a beautiful thing to watch. Companies will come, they will build, they will expand, new companies will start, and I look very, very much forward to doing it. We have to renegotiate our trade deals, and we have to stop these countries from stealing our companies and our jobs.
Secretary Clinton, would you like to respond?
Well, I think that trade is an important issue. Of course, we are 5% of the world's population. We have to trade with the other 95%. And we need to have smart, fair trade deals. We also, though, need to have a tax system that rewards work and not just financial transactions. And the kind of plan that Donald has put forth would be trickle-down economics all over again. In fact, it would be the most extreme version, the biggest tax cuts for the top percent of the people in this country than we've ever had. I call it trumped up trickle-down, because that's exactly what it would be. That is not how we grow the economy. We just have a different view about what's best for growing the economy, how we make investments that will actually produce jobs and rising incomes. I think we come at it from somewhat different perspectives. I understand that. You know, Donald was very fortunate in his life, and that's all to his benefit. He started his business with $14 million borrowed from his father, and he really believes that the more you help wealthy people, the better off we'll be, and that everything will work out from there. I don't buy that. I have a different experience. My father was a small businessman. He worked really hard. He printed drapery fabrics on long tables where he pulled out those fabrics and he went down with a silk screen and dumped the paint in and took the squeegee and kept going. And so what I believe is the more we can do for the middle class, the more we can invest in you, your education, your skills, your future, the better we will be off and the better we'll grow. That's the kind of economy I want us to see again.
Let me follow up with Mr. Trump if I can. You've talked about creating 25 million jobs, and you've promised to bring back millions of jobs for Americans. How are we going to bring back the industries that have left this country for cheaper labor overseas? How specifically are you going to tell American manufacturers that you have to come back?
Well, for one thing, and before we start on that, my father gave me a very small loan in 1975, and I built it into a company that's worth many, many billions of dollars with some of the greatest assets in the world. And I say that only because that's the kind of thinking that our country needs. Our country's in deep trouble. We don't know what we're doing when it comes to devaluations, and all of these countries all over the world, especially China, they're the best ever at it. What they're doing to us is a very, very sad thing. So we have to do that. We have to renegotiate our trade deals. And Lester, they're taking our jobs, they're giving incentives, they're doing things that, frankly, we don't do. Let me give you the example of Mexico. They have a VAT tax. We're in a different system. When we sell into Mexico, there's a tax. When they sell in, automatic, 16% approximately. When they sell into us, there's no tax. It's a defective agreement. It's been defective for a long time, many years, but the politicians haven't done anything about it. Now, in all fairness to Secretary Clinton, yes, is that okay? Good. I want you to be very happy. It's very important to me. But in all fairness to Secretary Clinton, when she started talking about this, it was really very recently. She's been doing this for 30 years. And why hasn't she made the agreements better? The NAFTA agreement is defective just because of the tax and many other reasons, but just because of the fact.
Let me interrupt just a moment. But
Secretary Clinton and others, politicians, should have been doing this for years, not right now because of the fact that we've created a movement. They should have been doing this for years. What's happened to our jobs and our country and our economy generally is, look, we owe $20 trillion. We cannot do it any longer, Lester.
Back to the question, though, how do you specifically bring back jobs? American manufacturers, how do you make them bring the jobs back?
Well, the first thing you do is don't let the jobs leave. The companies are leaving. I could name, there are thousands of them. They're leaving, and they're leaving in bigger numbers than ever. And what you do is you say, fine, you want to go to Mexico or some other country, good luck. We wish you a lot of luck. But if you think you're going to make your air conditioners or your cars or your cookies or whatever you make and bring them into our country without a tax, you're wrong. And once you say you're going to have to tax them coming in, and our politicians never do this because they have special interests, and the special interests want those companies to leave because in many cases they own the companies. So what I'm saying is we can stop them from leaving. We have to stop them from leaving, and that's a big, big factor.
Let me let Secretary Clinton get
Well,
in there.
let's stop for a second and remember where we were 8 years ago. We had the worst financial crisis, the Great Recession, the worst since the 1930s. That was in large part because of tax policies that slashed taxes on the wealthy, failed to invest in the middle class, took their eyes off of Wall Street, and created a perfect storm. In fact, Donald was one of the people who rooted for the housing crisis. He said back in 2006, gee, I hope it does collapse because then I can go in and buy some and make some money. Well, it did collapse.
That's called business, by the way.
9 million people lost their jobs. 5 million people lost their homes, and $13 trillion in family wealth was wiped out. Now, we have come back from that abyss, and it has not been easy. So we're now on the precipice of having a potentially much better economy. But the last thing we need to do is to go back to the policies that failed us in the first place. Independent experts have looked at what I've proposed and looked at what Donald's proposed, and basically they've said this, that if his tax plan, which would blow up the debt by over $5 trillion and would in some instances disadvantage middle-class families compared to the wealthy, were to go into effect, we would lose 3.5 million jobs and maybe have another recession. They've looked at my plans and they've said, okay, if we can do this, and I intend to get it done, we will have 10 million more new jobs because we will be making investments where we can grow the economy. Take clean energy. Some country is going to be the clean energy superpower of the 21st century. Donald thinks that climate change is a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese. I think it's real.
I did not.
Science is real.
I do not say that.
And I think it's important that we grip this and deal with it, both at home and abroad. And here's what we can do. We can deploy 500 million more solar panels. We can have enough clean energy to power every home. We can build a new modern electric grid. That's a lot of jobs. That's a lot of new economic activity. So I've tried to be very specific about what we can and should do, and I am determined that we're going to get the economy really moving again, building on the progress we've made over the last 8 years, but never going back to what got us in trouble in the first place.
Mr. Trump.
She talks about solar panels. We invested in a solar company, our country. That was a disaster. They lost plenty of money on that one. Now, look, I'm a great believer in all forms of energy, but we're putting a lot of people out of work. Our energy policies are a disaster. Our country is losing so much in terms of energy, in terms of paying off our debt. You can't do what you're looking to do with $20 trillion in debt. The Obama administration, from the time they've come in, is over 230 years worth of debt, and he's topped it. He's doubled it in a course of almost 8 years, 7.5 years to be semi-exact. So I will tell you this, we have to do a much better job at keeping our jobs, and we have to do a much better job at giving companies incentive to build new companies or to expand, because they're not doing it. And all you have to do is look at Michigan and look at Ohio and look at all of these places where so many of their jobs and their companies are just leaving. They're gone. And Hillary, I just ask you this. You've been doing this for 30 years. Why are you just thinking about these solutions right now? For 30 years you've been doing it, and now you're just starting to think of solutions.
Well, actually,
I will bring back jobs. You can't bring back jobs.
Well, actually, I have thought about this quite a bit.
Yeah, for 30 years.
I have, well, not quite that long. I think my husband did a pretty good job in the 1990s. I think a lot about what worked and how we can make it work again.
Well, he approved
3 million
NAFTA.
new jobs,
He approved
a balanced
NAFTA,
budget,
which is the single worst trade deal ever approved in this country.
Incomes went up for everybody. Manufacturing jobs went up also in the 1990s, if we're actually going to look at the facts. When I was in the Senate, I had a number of trade deals that came before me, and I held them all to the same test. Will they create jobs in America? Will they raise incomes in America? And are they good for our national security? Some of them I voted for. The biggest one, a multinational one known as CAFTA, I voted against. And because I hold the same standards as I look at all of these trade deals. But let's not assume that trade is the only challenge we have in the economy. I think it is a part of it, and I've said what I'm going to do. I'm going to have a special prosecutor. We're going to enforce the trade deals we have, and we're going to hold people accountable. When I was Secretary of State, we actually increased American exports globally 30%. We increased them to China 50%. So I know how to really work to get new jobs and to get exports that help to create more new jobs.
Well, you haven't done it in 30 years or 26 years.
Well,
any number you
I've
want to
been
do.
a senator.
You
Donald,
haven't done it.
And
You haven't
I
done
have
it.
been a
And excuse
Secretary
me,
of State, and I have
Your
done
husband signed
a lot.
NAFTA, which was one of the worst things that ever happened
Well,
to the
that's your
manufacturing
opinion.
industry.
That is your
You go
opinion.
to New England, you go to Ohio, Pennsylvania, you go anywhere you want, Secretary Clinton, and you will see devastation where manufacturing is down 30, 40, sometimes 50%. NAFTA is the worst trade deal maybe ever signed anywhere, but certainly ever signed in this country. And now you want to approve Trans-Pacific Partnership. You were totally in favor of it. Then you heard what I was saying, how bad it is, and you said, I can't win that debate. But you know that if you did win, you would approve that, and that will be almost as bad as NAFTA. Nothing will ever top NAFTA.
That is just not accurate. I was against it once it was finally negotiated and the terms were laid out. I wrote about that in...
You called it the gold standard. You called it the gold standard of trade deals. You said it's the finest deal you've ever seen.
No.
And then you heard what I said about it, and all of a sudden you were against it.
Well, Donald, I know you live in your own reality, but that is not the facts. The facts are, I did say I hoped it would be a good deal, but when it was negotiated, which I was not responsible for, I concluded it wasn't. I wrote about that.
So is it President Obama's fault? Is it President Obama's fault?
Even announced. Look, there
Secretary,
are
is it President Obama's fault?
There are
because he's pushing it.
There are different views about what's good for our country, our economy, and our leadership in the world. And I think it's important to look at what we need to do to get the economy going again. That's why I said new jobs with rising incomes, investments, not in more tax cuts that would add $5 trillion to the debt.
But you have no plan.
Oh, I do.
Secretary,
in fact,
you
I
have no
written
plan.
A book about it. It's called Stronger Together. You can pick it up
That's
tomorrow
about all you- Folks,
at
we're
the
gonna-
bookstore or at an airport near you. But it's because I see this. We need to have strong growth, fair growth, sustained growth. We also have to look at how we help families balance the responsibilities at home and the responsibilities at business. So we have a very robust set of plans, and people who have looked at both of our plans have concluded that mine would create 10 million jobs and yours would lose us 3.5 million jobs and explode
You are
the
going
debt,
to approve one of
which
the biggest
would
tax
have
cuts
a
in
recession.
history. You are going to approve one of the biggest tax increases in history. You are going to drive business out. Your regulations are a disaster, and you're going to increase regulations all over the place. And by the way, my tax cut is the biggest since Ronald Reagan. I'm very proud of it. It will create tremendous numbers of new jobs. But regulations, you are going to regulate these businesses out of existence. When I go around, Lester, I tell you this, I've been all over. And when I go around, despite the tax cut, the things that business and people like the most is the fact that I'm cutting regulation. You have regulations on top of regulations, and new companies cannot form, and old companies are going out of business, and you want to increase the regulations and make them even worse. I'm going to cut regulations, but I'm going to cut taxes big league, and you're going to raise taxes big league. End of story.
Let me get you to pause right there, because we're going to move into the next segment. We're going to talk taxes.
That can't be left
Please
to
just
stand.
take 30 seconds,
I
then we're going to go
kind
on.
of assumed that there would be a lot of these charges and claims. And so
Facts.
we have taken the homepage of my website, HillaryClinton.com, and we've turned it into a fact checker. So if you want to see in real time what the facts are, please go and take a look. Because
and take a look at mine also, and you'll see.
Add a penny to the debt, and your plans would add $5 trillion to the debt. What I have proposed would cut regulations and streamline them for small businesses. What I have proposed would be paid for by raising taxes on the wealthy because they have made all the gains in the economy. And I think it's time that the wealthy and corporations paid their fair share to support this country.
You just opened the next segment.
Well, look, could I just finish?
Actually,
I think I should.
I'm going to give you
go
a
to her
chance
website
right here. With the
and
new
you take a look at her website. She's going to raise taxes $1.3 trillion. Mr.
Trump,
and look at her website. You know what? It's no different than this. She's telling us how to fight ISIS. Just go to her website. She tells you how to fight ISIS on her website. I don't think General Douglas MacArthur would like that too much.
The next segment, we're continuing
Well,
the
at
subject
least I have a plan to fight
achieving
ISIS.
No, you're telling the enemy everything you want to do.
No, we're not.
See, you're telling the enemy everything you want to do. No wonder you've been fighting. No wonder you've been fighting ISIS your entire adult life.
Folks,
go to the fact checkers. Get
folks,
to work.
you are unpacking a lot here, and we're still on the issue of achieving prosperity. And I want to talk about taxes. The fundamental difference between the two of you concerns the wealthy. Secretary Clinton, you're calling for a tax increase in the wealthiest Americans. I'd like you to further defend that. And Mr. Trump, you're calling for tax cuts for the wealthy. I'd like you to defend that. And this next 2-minute answer goes to you, Mr. Trump.
Well, I'm really calling for major jobs because the wealthy are going to create tremendous jobs. They're going to expand their companies. They're going to do a tremendous job. I'm getting rid of the carried interest provision. And if you really look, it's not a tax. It's really not a great thing for the wealthy. It's a great thing for the middle class. It's a great thing for companies to expand. And when these people are going to put billions and billions of dollars into companies, and when they're going to bring $2.5 trillion back from overseas, where they can't bring the money back because politicians like Secretary Clinton the money back because the taxes are so onerous and the bureaucratic red tape. So what is so bad? So what they're doing is they're leaving our country, and they're, believe it or not, leaving because taxes are too high and because some of them have lots of money outside of our country. And instead of bringing it back and putting the money to work because they can't work out a deal to, and everybody agrees it should be brought back. Instead of that, they're leaving our country to get their money because they can't bring their money back into our country because of bureaucratic red tape, because they can't get together, because we have a president that can't sit them around a table and get them to approve something. And here's the thing. Republicans and Democrats agree that this should be done. $2.5 trillion. I happen to think it's double that. It's probably $5 trillion that we can't bring into our country, Lester. And with a little leadership, you'd get it in here very quickly, and it could be put to use on the inner cities and lots of other things, and it would be beautiful. But we have no leadership. And honestly, that starts with Secretary Clinton.
All right, you have 2 minutes on the same question to defend tax increases on the wealthiest Americans, Secretary Clinton.
I have a feeling that by the end of this evening, I'm going to be blamed for everything that's ever happened.
Why not?
Why not? Yeah, why not? Just join the debate by saying more crazy things. Now, let me say,
there's nothing crazy about not letting our companies bring their money back into their country.
This is Secretary Clinton's 2 minutes, please.
Yeah, well, let's start the clock again, Lester. We've looked at your tax proposals. I don't see changes in the corporate tax rates or the kinds of proposals you're referring to that would cause the repatriation, bringing back of money that's stranded overseas. I happen to support that. I happen to support that in a way that will actually work to our benefit. But when I look at what you have proposed, you have what is called now the Trump loophole, because it would so advantage you and the business you do. You've proposed an approach that has a $4 billion tax benefit for your family. And when you look at what you are proposing,
how much for my family?
It is, Lester, as I said, trumped up trickle down. Trickle down did not work. It got us into the mess we were in and 9. Slashing taxes on the wealthy hasn't worked, and a lot of really smart, wealthy people know that. And they are saying, hey, we need to do more to make the contributions we should be making to rebuild the middle class. I don't think top-down works in America. I think building the middle class, investing in the middle class, making college debt-free so more young people can get their education, helping people refinance their debt from college at a lower rate. Those are the kinds of things that will really boost the economy. Broad-based, inclusive growth is what we need in America, not more advantages for people at the very top.
Mr. Trump,
typical politician, all talk, no action, sounds good, doesn't work, never going to happen. Our country is suffering because people like Secretary Clinton have made such bad decisions in terms of our jobs and in terms of what's going on. Now, look, we have the worst revival of an economy since the Great Depression. And believe me, we're in a bubble right now. And the only thing that looks good is the stock market. But if you raise interest rates even a little bit, that's going to come crashing down. We are in a big, fat, ugly bubble. And we better be awfully careful. And we have a Fed that's doing political things. This Janet Yellen of the Fed is doing political by keeping the interest rates at this level. And believe me, the day Obama goes off and he leaves and he goes out to the golf course for the rest of his life to play golf, when they raise interest rates, you're going to see some very bad things happen because the Fed is not doing their job. The Fed is being more political than Secretary Clinton.
Mr. Trump, we're talking about the burden that Americans have to pay, yet you have not released your tax returns. And the reason nominees have released their returns for decades is so that voters will know if their potential president owes money to, who owes it to, and any business conflicts. Don't Americans have a right to know if there are any conflicts of interest?
I don't mind releasing. I'm under a routine audit, and it'll be released. And as soon as the audit's finished, it'll be released. But you will learn more about Donald Trump by going down to the federal elections, where I filed a 104-page, essentially financial statement of sorts, the forms that they have. It shows income. In fact, the income, I just looked today, the income is filed at $694 million for this past year. $694 million. If you would have told me I was going to make that 15 or 20 years ago, I would have been very surprised. But that's the kind of thinking that our country needs. When we have a country that's doing so badly, that's being ripped off by every single country in the world, it's the kind of thinking that our country needs because everybody... Lester, we have a trade deficit with all of the countries that we do business with of almost $800 billion a year. You know what that is? That means who's negotiating these trade deals? We have people that are political hacks negotiating our trade deals.
The IRS says an audit of your taxes, you're perfectly free to release your taxes during an audit. And so the question, does the public's right to know outweigh your personal...
Well, I told you, I will release them as soon as the audit. Look, I've been under audit almost for 15 years. I know a lot of wealthy people that have never been audited. I said, do you get audited? I get audited almost every year. And in a way, I should be complaining. I'm not even complaining. I don't mind it. It's almost become a way of life. I get audited by the IRS, but other people don't. I will say this. We have a situation in this country that has to be taken care of. I will release my tax returns against my lawyer's wishes. When she releases her 33,000 emails that have been deleted, as soon as she releases them, I will release my tax returns. And that's against my lawyers. They say, don't do it. I will tell you this. No, in fact, watching shows, reading the papers, almost every lawyer says, you don't release your returns until the audit's complete. When the audit's complete, I'll do it. But I would go against them if she releases her email.
So it's negotiable?
It's not negotiable. No, let her release the email. Why did she delete 33,000?
Well, I'll let her ask that, but let me just admonish the audience one more time. There was an agreement. We did ask you to be silent, so it would be helpful for us. Secretary Clinton.
Well, I think you've just seen another example of bait and switch here. For 40 years, everyone running for president has released their tax returns. You can go and see nearly, I think, 39, 40 years of our tax returns, but everyone has done it. We know the IRS has made clear there is no prohibition on releasing it when you're under audit. So you've got to ask yourself, why won't he release his tax returns? And I think there may be a couple of reasons. First, maybe he's not as rich as he says he is. Second, maybe he's not as charitable as he claims to be. Third, we don't know all of his business dealings, but we have been told through investigative reporting that he owes about $650 million to Wall Street and foreign banks. Or maybe he doesn't want the American people, all of you watching tonight, to know that he's paid nothing in federal taxes, because the only years that anybody's ever seen were a couple of years when he had to turn them over to state authorities when he was trying to get a casino license, and they showed he didn't pay any federal income tax. So if he's paid zero, that means zero for troops, zero for vets, zero for schools or health. And I think probably he's not all that enthusiastic about having the rest of our country see what the real reasons are, because it must be something really important, even terrible, that he's trying to hide. And the financial disclosure statement, they don't give you the tax rate. They don't give you all the details that tax returns would. And it just seems to me that this is something that the American people deserve to see. And I have no reason to believe that he's ever going to release his tax returns, because there's something he's hiding. And we'll guess. We'll keep guessing at what it might be that he's hiding. But I think the question is, were he ever to get near the White House, what would be those conflicts? Who does he owe money to? Well, he owes you the answers to that, and he should provide them.
He also raised the issue of your emails. Do you want to respond to that?
I do. You know, I made a mistake using a private email.
That's for sure.
And if I had to do it over again, I would obviously do it differently. But I'm not going to make any excuses. It was a mistake, and I take responsibility for that.
Mr. Trump?
That was more than a mistake. That was done purposely. Okay, that was not a mistake. That was done purposely. When you have your staff taking the Fifth Amendment, taking the Fifth, so they're not prosecuted. When you have the man that set up the illegal server taking the Fifth, I think it's disgraceful. And believe me, this country thinks it's disgraceful. It really thinks it's disgraceful also. As far as my tax returns, you don't learn that much from tax returns, that I can tell you. You learn a lot from financial disclosure. And you should go down and take a look at that. The other thing, I'm extremely underleveraged. The report that said 650, which, by the way, a lot of friends of mine that know my business said, boy, that's really not a lot of money. It's not a lot of money relative to what I had. The buildings that were in question, they said in the same report, which was actually wasn't even a bad story, to be honest with you, but the buildings are worth $3.9 billion. And the 650 isn't even on that, but it's not 650. It's much less than that. But I could give you a list of banks. I would, if that would help you, I would give you a list of banks. These are very fine institutions, very fine banks. I could do that very quickly. I am very underleveraged. I have a great company. I have a tremendous income. And the reason I say that is not in a braggadocious way. It's because it's about time that this country had somebody running it that has an idea about money. When we have $20 trillion in debt and our country's a mess, you know, it's one thing to have $20 trillion in debt and our roads are good and our bridges are good and everything's in great shape. Our airports are like from a third world country. You land at LaGuardia, you land at Kennedy, you land at LAX, you land at Newark, and you come in from Dubai and Qatar and you see these incredible, you come in from China, you see these incredible airports and you land, we've become a third world country. So, the worst of all things has happened. We owe $20 trillion, and we're a mess. We haven't even started. And we've spent $6 trillion in the Middle East, according to a report that I just saw, whether it's 6 or 5, but it looks like it's 6. $6 trillion in the Middle East. We could have rebuilt our country twice, and it's really a shame. And it's politicians like Secretary Clinton that have caused this problem. Our country has tremendous problems. We're a debtor nation, we're a serious debtor nation, and we have a country that needs new roads, new tunnels, new bridges, new airports, new schools, new hospitals. And we don't have the money because it's been squandered on so many of your ideas.
Let you
and
respond,
maybe
and we'll move to our
because
next.
you haven't paid any federal income tax for a lot of years. And the other thing I think is important.
It would be squandered too, believe me.
If your main claim to be president of the United States is your business, then I think we should talk about that. You know, your campaign manager said that you built a lot of businesses on the backs of little guys. And indeed, I have met a lot of the people who were stiffed by you and your businesses, Donald. I've met dishwashers, painters, architects, glass installers, marble installers, drapery installers, like my dad was, who you refused to pay when they finished the work that you asked them to do. We have an architect in the audience who designed one of your clubhouses at one of your golf courses. It's a beautiful facility. It immediately was put to use, and you wouldn't pay what the man needed to be paid, what he was charging you.
Maybe he didn't do a good job, and I was unsatisfied with his work, which our country should do too.
The thousands of people that you have stiffed over the course of your business not deserve some kind of apology from someone who has taken their labor, taken the goods that they produced, and then refused to pay them. I can only say that I'm certainly relieved that my late father never did business with you. He provided a good middle-class life for us, but the people he worked for, he expected the bargain to be kept on both sides. And when we talk about your business, you've taken business bankruptcy 6 times. There are a lot of great business people that have never taken bankruptcy once. You call yourself the king of debt. You talk about leverage. You even at one time suggested that you would try to negotiate down the national debt of the United States. Well, sometimes there's not a direct transfer of skills from business to government. But sometimes what happened in business would be really bad for government.
Let's let Mr.
And
Trump
we need
So, yeah,
to
I think
be
it's-
very
I do think
clear
it's time.
about that.
Look, it's all words. It's all sound bites. I built an unbelievable company. Some of the greatest assets anywhere in the world, real estate assets anywhere in the world, beyond the United States, in Europe, lots of different places. It's an unbelievable company. But on occasion, 4 times, we used certain laws that are there. And when Secretary Clinton talks about people that didn't get paid, first of all, they did get paid a lot, but taking advantage of the laws of the nation. Now, if you want to change the laws, you've been there a long time, change the laws. But I take advantage of the laws of the nation because I'm running a company. My obligation right now is to do well for myself, my family, my employees, for my companies. And that's what I do. But what she doesn't say is the tens of thousands of people that are unbelievably happy and that love me. I'll give you an example. We're just opening up on Pennsylvania Avenue, right next to the White House. So if I don't get there one way, I'm going to get to Pennsylvania Avenue another. But we're opening the old post office. Under budget, ahead of schedule, saved tremendous money. I'm a year ahead of schedule. And that's what this country should be doing. We build roads and they cost 2 and 3 and 4 times what they're supposed to cost. We buy products for our military and they come in at costs that are so far above what they were supposed to be because we don't have people that know what they're doing. When we look at the budget is bad to a large extent because we have people that have no idea as to what to do and how to buy. The Trump International is way under budget and way ahead of schedule. And we should be able to do that for our country.
Well, we're well behind schedule, so I want to move to our next segment. We move into our next segment talking about America's direction, and let's start by talking about race. The share of Americans who say race relations are bad in this country is the highest it's been in decades, much of it amplified by shootings of African Americans by police, as we've seen recently in Charlotte and Tulsa. Race has been a big issue in this campaign, and one of you is going to have to bridge a very wide and bitter gap. So how do you heal the divide? Secretary Clinton, you get 2 minutes on this.
Well, you're right. Race remains a significant challenge in our country. Unfortunately, race still determines too much, often determines where people live, determines what kind of education in their public schools they can get, and yes, it determines how they're treated in the criminal justice system. We've just seen those two tragic examples in both Tulsa and Charlotte. And we've got to do several things at the same time. We have to restore trust between communities and the police. We have to work to make sure that our police are using the best training, the best techniques, that they're well prepared to use force only when necessary. Everyone should be respected by the law, and everyone should respect the law. Right now, that's not the case in a lot of our neighborhoods. So I have, ever since the first day of my campaign, called for criminal justice reform. I've laid out a platform that I think would begin to remedy some of the problems we have in the criminal justice system. But we also have to recognize, in addition to the challenges that we face with policing, there are so many good, brave police officers who equally want reform. So we have to bring communities together in order to begin working on that as a mutual goal. And we've got to get guns out of the hands of people who should not have them. The gun epidemic is the leading cause of death of young African American men, more than the next 9 causes put together. So we have to do two things, as I said. We have to restore trust. We have to work with the police. We have to make sure they respect the communities and the communities respect them. And we have to tackle the plague of gun violence, which is a big contributor to a lot of the problems that we're seeing today.
All right, Mr. Trump, you have 2 minutes. How do you heal the divide?
Well, first of all, Secretary Clinton doesn't want to use a couple of words, and that's law and order. And we need law and order. If we don't have it, we're not going to have a country. And when I look at what's going on in Charlotte, a city I love, a city where I have investments, when I look at what's going on throughout various parts of our country, whether it's, I can just keep naming them all day long. We need law and order in our country. And I just got today, as you know, the endorsement of the Fraternal Order of Police. We just came in. We have endorsements from, I think, almost every police group, a large percentage of them in the United States. We have a situation where we have our inner cities, African Americans, Hispanics, are living in hell because it's so dangerous. You walk down the street, you get shot. In Chicago, they've had thousands of shootings, thousands, since January 1st. Thousands of shootings. And I'm saying, where is this? Is this a war-torn country? What are we doing? And we have to stop the violence. We have to bring back law and order in a place like Chicago, where thousands of people have been killed, thousands over the last number of years. In fact, almost 4,000 have been killed since Barack Obama became president. Almost 4,000 people in Chicago have been killed. We have to bring back law and order. Now, whether or not in a place like Chicago you do stop and frisk, which worked very well, Mayor Giuliani is here, it worked very well in New York. It brought the crime rate way down. But you take the gun away from criminals that shouldn't be having it. We have gangs roaming the street, and in many cases, they're illegally here, illegal immigrants, and they have guns, and they shoot people. And we have to be very strong, and we have to be very vigilant. We have to know what we're doing. Right now, our police, in many cases, are afraid to do anything. We have to protect our inner cities because African American communities are being decimated by crime.
Your 2 minutes expired, but I do want to follow up. Stop and frisk was ruled unconstitutional in New York because it largely singled out Black and Hispanic young men.
No, you're wrong. It went before a judge who was a very against police judge. It was taken away from her, and our new mayor, refused to go forward with the case. They would have won an appeal. If you look at it throughout the country, there are many places where
the argument is that it's a form of racial profiling.
No, the argument is that we have to take the guns away from these people that have them and that are bad people that shouldn't have them. These are felons. These are people that are bad people that shouldn't be. When you have 3,000 shootings in Chicago from January 1st, when you have 4,000 people killed in Chicago by guns from the beginning of the presidency of Barack Obama, his hometown, you have to have stop and frisk. You need more police. You need a better community relation. You don't have good community relations in Chicago. It's terrible. I have property there. It's terrible what's going on in Chicago. But when you look, and Chicago's not the only, you go to Ferguson, you go to so many different places. You need better relationships. I agree with Secretary Clinton on this. You need better relationships between the communities and the police, because in some cases it's not good. But you look at Dallas, where the relationships were really studied. The relationships were really a beautiful thing. And then 5 police officers were killed one night very violently. So there's some bad things going on, some really bad things.
Secretary Clinton,
but we need, Lester, we need law and order. And we need law and order in the inner cities, because the people that are most affected by what's happening are African American and Hispanic people. And it's very unfair to them what our politicians are allowing to happen.
Secretary Clinton.
Well, I've heard Donald say this at his rallies, and it's really unfortunate that he paints such a dire, negative picture of black communities in our country.
Oh.
You know, the vibrancy of the black church, the black businesses that employ so many people, the opportunities that so many families are working to provide for their kids. There's a lot that we should be proud of and we should be supporting and lifting up. But we do always have to make sure we keep people safe. There are the right ways of doing it, and then there are ways that are ineffective. Stop and frisk was found to be unconstitutional, and in part because it was ineffective. It did not do what it needed to do. Now, I believe in community policing, and in fact, violent crime is 1/2 of what it was in 1991. Property crime is down 40%. We just don't want to see it creep back up. We've had 25 years of very good cooperation, but there were some problems, some unintended consequences. Too many young African American and Latino men ended up in jail for nonviolent offenses. And it's just a fact that if you're a young African American man and you do the same thing as a young white man, you are more likely to be arrested, charged, convicted, and incarcerated. So we've got to address the systemic racism in our criminal justice system. We cannot just say law and order. We have to say we have to come forward with a plan that is going to divert people from the criminal justice system, deal with mandatory minimum sentences, which have put too many people away for too long for doing too little. We need to have more second chance programs. I'm glad that we're ending private prisons in the federal system. I want to see them ended in the state system. You shouldn't have a profit motivation to fill prison cells with young Americans. So there are some positive ways we can work on this. And I believe strongly that common sense gun safety measures would assist us right now. And this is something Donald has supported along with the gun lobby. Right now, we've got too many military-style weapons on the streets. In a lot of places, our police are outgunned. We need comprehensive background checks, and we need to keep guns out of the hands of those who will do harm. And we finally need to pass a prohibition on anyone who's on the terrorist watch list from being able to buy a gun in our country. If you're too dangerous to fly, you are too dangerous to buy a gun. So there are things we can do, and we ought to do it in a bipartisan way.
Secretary Clinton, last week you said we've got to do everything possible to improve policing, to go right at implicit bias. Do you believe that police are implicitly biased against black people?
Lester, I think implicit bias is a problem for everyone, not just police. I think, unfortunately, too many of us in our great country jump to conclusions about each other. And therefore, I think we need all of us to be asking hard questions about, why am I feeling this way? But when it comes to policing, since it can have literally fatal consequences, I have said in my first budget we would put money into that budget to help us deal with implicit bias by retraining a lot of our police officers. I met with a group of very distinguished, experienced police chiefs a few weeks ago. They admit it's an issue. They've got a lot of concerns. Mental health is one of the biggest concerns because now police are having to handle a lot of really difficult mental health problems on the street. They want support. They want more training. They want more assistance. And I think the federal government could be in a position where we would offer and provide that.
I'd like to respond.
Please.
First of all, I agree, and a lot of people, even within my own party, want to give certain rights to people on watch lists and no-fly lists. I agree with you. When a person is on a watch list or a no-fly list, and I have the endorsement of the NRA, which I'm very proud of, these are very, very good people, and they're protecting the Second Amendment. But I think we have to look very strongly at no-fly lists and watch lists, and when people are on there, even if they shouldn't be on there, we'll help them legally, we'll help them get off. But I tend to agree with that quite strongly. I do want to bring up the fact that you were the one that brought up the word super predator about young black youth. And that's a term that I think was it's been horribly met, as you know. I think you've apologized for it. But I think it was a terrible thing to say. And when it comes to stop and frisk, you know, you're talking about taking guns away. Well, I'm talking about taking guns away from gangs and people that use them. And I really don't think you disagree with me on this, if you want to know the truth. I think maybe there's a political reason why you can't say it, but I really don't believe. In New York City, stop and frisk, we had 2,200 murders, and stop and frisk brought it down to 500 murders. 500 murders is a lot of murders. Hard to believe. 500 is like supposed to be good. But we went from 2,200 to 500, and it was continued on by Mayor Bloomberg, and it was terminated by current mayor. But stop and frisk had a tremendous impact on the safety of New York City, tremendous beyond belief. So when you say it has no impact, it really did. It had a very, very big impact.
Well, it's also fair to say, if we're going to talk about mayors, that under the current mayor, crime has continued to drop, including murders. So
You're wrong.
No, I'm not.
Murders are up. All right, you check.
New York has done an excellent job, and I give credit. I give credit across the board, going back to mayors, to police chiefs, because it has worked, and other communities need to come together to do what will work as well. Look, one murder is too many, but it is important that we learn about what has been effective and not go to things that sound good that really did not have the kind of impact that we would want. Who disagrees with keeping neighborhoods safe? But let's also add, no one should disagree about respecting the rights of young men who live in those neighborhoods. And so we need to do a better job of working again with the communities, faith communities, business communities, as well as the police, to try to deal with this problem.
This conversation is about race, and so, Mr. Trump, I have to ask you.
But I'd like to just respond, if I might.
Please, 20 seconds.
I'd just like to respond.
Please respond, then I've got to follow up.
Look, the African-American community has been let down by our politicians. They talk good around election time, like right now, and after the election, they said, see you later, I'll see you in 4 years. The African-American community, look, the community within the inner cities has been so badly treated. They've been abused and used in order to get votes by Democrat politicians, because that's what it is. They've controlled these communities for up to 100 years.
Mr. Trump, let me...
Unbroken. And I will tell you, you look at the inner cities, and I just left Detroit, and I just left Philadelphia, and I just, you know, you've seen me. I've been all over the place. You decided to stay home, and that's okay. But I will tell you, I've been all over, and I've met some of the greatest people I'll ever meet within these communities, and they are very, very upset with what their politicians have told them and what their politicians have done.
Mr. Trump,
I think Donald just criticized me for preparing for this debate, and yes, I did. And you know what else I prepared for? I prepared to be president, and I think that's a good thing.
Mr. Trump, for 5 years, you perpetuated a false claim that the nation's first black president was not a natural-born citizen. You questioned his legitimacy. In the last couple of weeks, you acknowledged what most Americans have accepted for years. The president was born in the United States. Can you tell us what took you so long?
I'll tell you just very simple to say. Sidney Blumenthal works for the campaign and very close friend of Secretary Clinton. And her campaign manager, Patty Doyle, went during the campaign, her campaign against President Obama, fought very hard. And you can go look it up and you can check it out. And if you look at CNN this past week, Patty Solis Doyle was on Wolf Blitzer saying that this happened. Blumenthal sent McClatchy, highly respected reporter at McClatchy, to Kenya to find out about it. They were pressing it very hard. She failed to get the birth certificate. When I got involved, I didn't fail. I got him to give the birth certificate. So I'm satisfied with it. And I'll tell you why I'm satisfied with it.
That was
because I want to get on to defeating ISIS. Because I want to get on to creating jobs. Because I want to get on to having a strong border. Because I want to get on to things that are very important to me and that are very important to the country.
I'll let you respond. That's important. But I just want to get the answer here. The birth certificate was produced in 2011. You continued to tell the story and question the president's legitimacy in 2012, 13, 14, 15, as recently as January. So the question is, what changed your mind?
Well, nobody was pressing it. Nobody was caring much about it. I figured you'd ask the question tonight, of course, but nobody was caring much about it. But I was the one that got him to produce the birth certificate, and I think I did a good job. Secretary Clinton also fought it. I mean, now everybody in mainstream is going to say, oh, that's not true. Look, it's true. Sidney Blumenthal sent a reporter. You just have to take a look at CNN last week, the interview with your former campaign manager, and she was involved. But just like she can't bring back jobs, she can't produce.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to follow up, and I will let you respond to that because there's a lot there. But we're talking about racial healing in this segment. What do you say to Americans?
Well, it was I say nothing. I say nothing because I was able to get him to produce it. He should have produced it a long time before. I say nothing. But let me just tell you, when you talk about healing, I think that I've developed very, very good relationships over the last little while with the African American community. I think you can see that. And I feel that they really wanted me to come to that conclusion, and I think I did a great job and a great service, not only for the country, but even for the president, in getting him to produce his birth certificate.
Secretary Clinton.
Well, just listen to what you heard. And clearly, as Donald just admitted, he knew he was going to stand on this debate stage, and Lester Holt was going to be asking us questions, so he tried to put the whole racist birther lie to bed. But it can't be dismissed that easily. He has really started his political activity based on this racist lie that our first black president was not an American citizen. There was absolutely no evidence for it, but he persisted. He persisted year after year because some of his supporters, people that he was trying to bring into his fold, apparently believed it or wanted to believe it. But remember, Donald started his career back in 1973 being sued by the Justice Department for racial discrimination because he would not rent apartments in one of his developments to African Americans, and he made sure that the people who worked for him understood that was the policy. He actually was sued twice by the Justice Department. So he has a long record of engaging in racist behavior. And the birther lie was a very hurtful one. Barack Obama is a man of great dignity, and I could tell how much it bothered him and annoyed him that this was being touted and used against him. But I like to remember what Michelle Obama said in her amazing speech at our Democratic National Convention. When they go low, we go high. And Barack Obama went high, despite Donald Trump's best efforts to bring him down.
Mr. Trump, you can respond, then we're going to move on
I
to
would
the next
love to
segment.
respond. First of all, I got to watch in preparing for this some of your debates against Barack Obama. You treated him with terrible disrespect. And I watched the way you talk now about how lovely everything is and how wonderful you are. It doesn't work that way. You were after him. You were trying to. You even sent out, or your campaign sent out, pictures of him in a certain garb. Very famous pictures. I don't think you can deny that. But just last week, your campaign manager said it was true. So when you try to act holier than thou, it really doesn't work. It really doesn't. Now, as far as the lawsuit, yes, when I was very young, I went into my father's company, had a real estate company in Brooklyn and Queens, and we, along with many, many other companies throughout the country, it was a federal lawsuit, were sued. We settled the suit with no admission of guilt. It was very easy to do, but they sued many people. I notice you bring that up a lot, and I also noticed the very nasty commercials that you do on me in so many different ways, which I don't do on you. Maybe I'm trying to save the money, but frankly, I look at that and I say, isn't that amazing? Because I settled that lawsuit with no admission of guilt, but that was a lawsuit brought against many real estate firms, and it's just one of those things. I'll go on one step further. In Palm Beach, Florida, tough community, a brilliant community, a wealthy community, probably the wealthiest community there is in the world. I opened a club and really got great credit for it. No discrimination against African Americans, against Muslims, against anybody. And it's a tremendously successful club, and I'm so glad I did it. And I have been given great credit for what I did, and I'm very, very proud of it. And that's the way I feel. That is the true way I feel.
Our next segment is called Securing America. We want to start with a 21st century war happening every day in this country. Our institutions are under cyber attack, and our secrets are being stolen. So my question is, who's behind it, and how do we fight it? Secretary Clinton, this answer goes to you.
Well, I think cybersecurity, cyber warfare will be one of the biggest challenges facing the next president, because clearly we're facing at this point two different kinds of adversaries. There are the independent hacking groups that do it mostly for commercial reasons, to try to steal information that they then can use to make money. But increasingly, we are seeing cyber attacks coming from states, organs of states. The most recent and troubling of these has been Russia. There's no doubt now that Russia has used cyber attacks against all kinds of organizations in our country, and I am deeply concerned about this. I know Donald's very praiseworthy of Vladimir Putin, but Putin is playing a really tough, long game here. And one of the things he's done is to let loose cyber attackers to hack into government files, to hack into personal files, hack into the Democratic National Committee. And we recently have learned that, that this is one of their preferred methods of trying to wreak havoc and collect information. We need to make it very clear, whether it's Russia, China, Iran, or anybody else, the United States has much greater capacity. And we are not going to sit idly by and permit state actors to go after our information, our private sector information or our public sector information. And we're going to have to make it clear that we don't want to use the kinds of tools that we have. We don't want to engage in a different kind of warfare, but we will defend the citizens of this country. And the Russians need to understand that. I think they've been treating it as almost a probing. How far would we go? How much would we do? And that's why I was so shocked when Donald publicly invited Putin to hack into Americans. That is just unacceptable. It's one of the reasons why 50 national security officials who served in Republican administration have said that Donald is unfit to be the commander-in-chief. It's comments like that that really worry people who understand the threats that we face.
Mr. Trump, you have 2 minutes on the same question. Who's behind it, and how do we fight it?
I do want to say that I was just endorsed, and more are coming next week. It'll be over 200 admirals, many of them are here, admirals and generals endorsed me to lead this country. That just happened, and many more are coming. And I'm very proud of it. In addition, I was just endorsed by ICE. They've never endorsed anybody before on immigration. I was just endorsed by ICE. I was just recently endorsed 16,500 Border Patrol agents. So when Secretary Clinton talks about this, I mean, I'll take the admirals and I'll take the generals any day over the political hacks that I see that have led our country so brilliantly over the last 10 years with their knowledge, okay? Because look at the mess that we're in. Look at the mess that we're in. As far as the cyber, I agree to parts of what Secretary Clinton said. We should be better than anybody else, and perhaps we're not. I don't think anybody knows it was Russia that broke into the DNC. She's saying Russia, 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 but maybe it was. I mean, it could be Russia, but it could also be China. It could also be lots of other people. It also could be somebody sitting on their bed that weighs 400 pounds, okay? You don't know who broke in to DNC, but what did we learn with DNC? We learned that Bernie Sanders was taken advantage of by your people, by Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Look what happened to her. But Bernie Sanders was taken advantage of. That's what we learned. Now, whether that was Russia, whether that was China, whether it was another country, we don't know. Because the truth is, under President Obama, we've lost control of things that we used to have control over. We came in with the internet, we came up with the internet, and I think Secretary Clinton and myself would agree very much. When you look at what ISIS is doing with the internet, they're beating us at our own game, ISIS. So we have to get very, very tough on cyber and cyber warfare. It is a huge problem. I have a son. He's 10 years old. He has computers. He is so good with these computers. It's unbelievable. The security aspect of cyber is very, very tough, and maybe it's hardly doable. But I will say we are not doing the job we should be doing. But that's true throughout our whole governmental society. We have so many things that we have to do better, Lester, and certainly cyber is one of them.
Secretary Clinton?
Well, I think there are a number of issues that we should be addressing. I have put forth a plan to defeat ISIS. It does involve going after them online. I think we need to do much more with our tech companies to prevent ISIS and their operatives from being able to use the internet to radicalize, even direct people in our country and Europe and elsewhere. But we also have to intensify our air strikes against ISIS and eventually support our Arab and Kurdish partners to be able to actually take out ISIS in Raqqa and their claim of being a caliphate. We're making progress. Our military is assisting in Iraq, and we're hoping that within the year we'll be able to push ISIS out of Iraq and then, really squeeze them in Syria. But we have to be cognizant of the fact that they've had foreign fighters coming to volunteer for them, foreign money, foreign weapons. So we have to make this the top priority. And I would also do everything possible to take out their leadership. I was involved in a number of efforts to take out al-Qaeda leadership when I was Secretary of State, including, of course, taking out bin Laden. And I think we need to go after Baghdadi as well, make that one of our organizing principles, because we've got to defeat ISIS, and we've got to do everything we can to disrupt their propaganda efforts online.
You mentioned ISIS, and we think of ISIS certainly as over there, but there are American citizens who have been inspired to commit acts of terror on American soil. The latest incident, of course, the bombings we just saw in New York and New Jersey, the knife attack at a mall in Minnesota, and the last year, deadly attacks in San Bernardino and Orlando. I'll ask this to both of you. Tell us specifically how you would prevent homegrown attacks by American citizens, Mr. Trump.
Well, first I have to say one thing, very important. Secretary Clinton is talking about taking out ISIS. We will take out ISIS. Well, President Obama and Secretary Clinton created a vacuum the way they got out of Iraq, because they got out, they shouldn't have been in, but once they got in, the way they got out was a disaster, and ISIS was formed. So she talks about taking them out. She's been doing it a long time. She's been trying to take them out for a long time. But they wouldn't have even been formed if they left some troops behind. like 10,000 or maybe something more than that. And then you wouldn't have had them. Or, as I've been saying for a long time, and I think you'll agree because I said it to you once, had we taken the oil, and we should have taken the oil, ISIS would not have been able to form either because the oil was their primary source of income. And now they have the oil all over the place, including the oil, a lot of the oil in Libya, which was another one of her disasters.
Secretary Clinton.
Well, I hope the fact checkers are turning up the volume and really working hard. Donald supported the invasion of Iraq.
Wrong.
That is absolutely
wrong.
Proved over and over again.
Wrong.
He actually advocated for the actions we took in Libya and urged that Gaddafi be taken out after actually doing some business with him one time. But the larger point, he says this constantly, is George W. Bush made the agreement about when American troops would leave Iraq, not Barack Obama. And the only way that American troops could have stayed in Iraq is to get an agreement from the then Iraqi government that would have protected our troops. And the Iraqi government would not give that. But let's talk about the question you asked, Lester. The question you asked is, what do we do here in the United States? That's the most important part of this. How do we prevent attacks? How do we protect our people? And I think we've got to have an intelligence surge where we are looking for every scrap of information. I was so proud of law enforcement in New York, in Minnesota, in New Jersey. You know, they responded so quickly, so professionally to the attacks that occurred by Rahami. And they brought him down. And we may find out more information because he is still alive, which may prove to be an intelligence benefit. So we've got to do everything we can to vacuum up intelligence from Europe, from the Middle East. That means we've got to work more closely with our allies. And that's something that Donald has been very dismissive of. We're working with NATO, the longest military alliance in the history of the world, to really turn our attention to terrorism. We're working with our friends in the Middle East, many of which, as you know, are Muslim majority nations. Donald has consistently insulted Muslims abroad, Muslims at home, when we need to be cooperating with Muslim nations and with the American Muslim community. They're on the front lines. They can provide information to us that we might not get anywhere else. They need to have close working cooperation with law enforcement in these communities, not be alienated and pushed away, as some of Donald's rhetoric, unfortunately, has led to.
Mr.
Well, I'd have to respond.
Please respond.
The secretary said very strongly about working with. We've been working with them for many years. And we have the greatest mess anyone's ever seen. You look at the Middle East, it's a total mess. Under your direction to a large extent. But you look at the Middle East, you started the Iran deal. That's another beauty where you have a country that was ready to fall. I mean, they were doing so badly. They were choking on the sanctions, and now they're going to be actually probably a major power at some point pretty soon, the way they're going. But when you look at NATO, I was asked on a major show, what do you think of NATO? And you have to understand, I'm a business person. I did really well, but I have common sense. And I said, well, I'll tell you, I haven't given lots of thought to NATO, but two things. Number one, the 28 countries of NATO, many of them aren't paying their fair share. Number two, and that bothers me because we should be, we're defending them and they should at least be paying us what they're supposed to be paying by treaty and contract. And number two, I said, and very strongly, NATO could be obsolete because, and I was very strong on this, and it was actually covered very accurately in the New York Times, which is unusual for the New York Times, to be honest. But I said they do not focus on terror. And I was very strong, and I said it numerous times. And about 4 months ago, I read on the front page of the Wall Street Journal that NATO is opening up a major terror division. And I think that's great. And I think we should get, because we pay approximately 73% of the cost of NATO. It's a lot of money to protect other people. But I'm all for NATO. But I said they have to focus on terror also. And they're going to do that. And that was, believe me, I'm sure I'm not going to get credit for it, but that was largely because of what I was saying and my criticism of NATO. I think we have to get NATO to go into the Middle East with us in addition to surrounding nations, and we have to knock the hell out of ISIS, and we have to do it fast. When ISIS formed in this vacuum created by Barack Obama and Secretary Clinton, and believe me, you were the ones that took out the troops. Not only that, you named the day. They couldn't believe it. They sat back probably and said, I can't believe it. They said, no, wait a minute.
We've covered
when
this
they
ground.
When they formed, this is something that never should have happened. It should have never happened. Now, you're talking about taking out ISIS, but you were there and you were Secretary of State when it was a little infant. Now it's in over 30 countries. And you're going to stop them? I don't think so.
Mr. Trump, a lot of these are judgment questions. You had supported the war in Iraq before the invasion. What makes your judgment?
I did not support the war in Iraq.
2002.
That is a mainstream media nonsense put out by her because she, frankly, I think the best person in her campaign is mainstream media.
My question is, since you
would you like to hear?
Why is your
I was against the war. Wait a minute. I was against the war in Iraq, just so you put it out.
The record shows otherwise.
The record
but why
does not show that.
Why is your judgment?
The record shows that I'm right. When I did an interview with Howard Stern, very lightly, first time anyone's asked me that, I said, very lightly, I don't know, maybe, who knows, essentially. I then did an interview with Neil Cavuto. We talked about the economy is more important. I then spoke to Sean Hannity, which everybody refuses to call Sean Hannity. I had numerous conversations with Sean Hannity at Fox, and Sean Hannity said, and he called me the other day, and I spoke to him about it. He said, you were totally against the war because he was for the war.
Why is your judgment better than...
And that was before the war started. Sean Hannity said very strongly to me and other people, he's willing to say, but nobody wants to call him, I was against the war. He said, you used to have fights with me because Sean was in favor of the war. And I understand that side also, not very much because we should have never been there. But nobody called Sean Hannity. And then they did an article in a major magazine shortly after the war started, I think in 2004, but they did an article which had me totally against the war in Iraq. And one of your compatriots said, you know, whether it was before or right after, Trump was definitely, because if you read this article, there's no doubt. But if somebody, and I'll ask the press, if somebody would call up Sean Hannity, this was before the war started, he and I used to have arguments about the war. I said it's a terrible and a stupid thing. It's going to destabilize the Middle East, and that's exactly what it's done. It's been a disaster.
My reference was to what you had said in 2002, and my question was, why is your judgment any different than Mrs. Clinton?
Well, I have much better judgment than she does. There's no question about that. I also have a much better temperament than she has. You know, I have a much better... She spent, let me tell you, she spent hundreds of millions of dollars on an advertising. You know, they get Madison Avenue into a room, they put names, oh, temperament, let's go after. I think my strongest asset, maybe by far, is my temperament. I have a winning temperament. I know how to win. She does not know how to win.
Clinton.
Wait, the AFL-CIO the other day, behind the blue screen, I don't know who you were talking to, Secretary Clinton, but you were totally out of control. I said, there's a person with a temperament that's got a problem.
Secretary Clinton.
Woo, okay. Let's talk about two important issues that were briefly mentioned by Donald. First, NATO. You know, NATO as a military alliance has something called Article 5, and basically it says this: an attack on one is an attack on all. And you know the only time it's ever been invoked? After 9/11, when the 28 nations of NATO said that they would go to Afghanistan with us to fight terrorism, something that they still are doing by our side. With respect to Iran, when I became Secretary of State, Iran was weeks away from having enough nuclear material to form a bomb. They had mastered the nuclear fuel cycle under the Bush administration. They had built covert facilities. They had stocked them with centrifuges that were whirling away. And we had sanctioned them. I voted for every sanction against Iran when I was in the Senate, but it wasn't enough. So I spent a year and a half putting together a coalition that included Russia and China to impose the toughest sanctions on Iran. And we did drive them to the negotiating table. And my successor, John Kerry, and President Obama got a deal on Kerry, and President Obama got a deal that put a lid on Iran's nuclear program. That's diplomacy. That's coalition building. That's working with other nations. The other day, I saw Donald saying that there were some Iranian sailors on a ship in the waters off of Iran, and they were taunting American sailors who were on a nearby ship. He said, you know, if they taunted our sailors, I'd blow them out of the water and start another war. That would not good judgment. That is not the right temperament to be commander-in-chief, to be taunted. And the worst part of what we've heard Donald say has been about nuclear weapons. He has said repeatedly that he didn't care if other nations got nuclear weapons, Japan, South Korea, even Saudi Arabia. It has been the policy of the United States, Democrats and Republicans, to do everything we could to reduce the proliferation of nuclear weapons. He even said, well, you know, if there were nuclear war in the East Asia, well, you know, that's fine. You know, have a good time, folks. And in fact, his cavalier attitude about nuclear weapons is so deeply troubling. That is the number one threat we face in the world, and it becomes particularly threatening if terrorists ever get their hands on any nuclear material. So a man who can be provoked by a tweet should not have his fingers anywhere near the nuclear codes, as far as I think anyone with any sense about this should be concerned.
That line's getting a little bit old, I must say. Listen,
it's a good one, though.
I would like to,
well describes the problem.
It's not an accurate one at all. It's not an accurate one. So I just want to give a lot of things and just to respond. I agree with her on one thing. The single greatest problem the world has is nuclear armament, nuclear weapons. Not global warming like you think and your president thinks. Nuclear is the single greatest threat. Just to go down the list, we defend Japan, we defend Germany, we defend South Korea, we defend Saudi Arabia, we defend countries. They do not pay us what they should be paying us because we are providing tremendous service and we're losing a fortune. That's why we're losing. We lose on everything. I say, who makes these? We lose on everything. Well, I said that it's very possible that if they don't pay a fair share, because this isn't 40 years ago where we could do what we're doing. We can't defend Japan, a behemoth selling us cars by the million.
We need to move on.
Wait, but it's very important. All I said was they may have to defend themselves or they have to help us out. We're a country that owes $20 trillion. They have to help us out. As far as the nuclear is concerned, I agree. It is the single greatest threat that this country has.
Which leads my next question as we enter our last segment here still on the subject of securing America. On nuclear weapons, President Obama reportedly considered changing the nation's longstanding policy on first use. Do you support the current policy? Mr. Trump, you have 2 minutes on that.
Well, I have to say that, for what Secretary Clinton was saying about nuclear with Russia, she's very cavalier in the way she talks about various countries. But Russia's been expanding. They have a much newer capability than we do. We have not been updating from the new standpoint. I looked the other night, I was seeing B-52s. They're old enough that your father, your grandfather could be flying them. We are not keeping up with other countries. I would like everybody to end it, just get rid of it. But I would certainly not do first strike. I think that once the nuclear alternative happens, it's over. At the same time, we have to be prepared. I can't take anything off the table because you look at some of these countries, you look at North Korea, we're doing nothing there. China should solve that problem for us. China should go into North Korea. China is totally powerful as it relates to North Korea. And by the way, another one powerful is the worst deal I think I've ever seen negotiated that you started is the Iran deal. Iran is one of their biggest trading partners. Iran has power over North Korea. And when they made that horrible deal with Iran, they should have included the fact that they do something with respect to North Korea. And they should have done something with respect to Yemen and all these other places. And when asked to Secretary Kerry, why didn't you do that? Why didn't you add other things into the deal? One of the great giveaways of all time, including $400 million in cash Nobody's ever seen that before. That turned out to be wrong. It was actually $1.7 billion in cash. Obviously, I guess, for the hostages, it certainly looks that way. So you say to yourself, why didn't they make the right deal? This is one of the worst deals ever made by any country in history. The deal with Iran will lead to nuclear problems. All they have to do is sit back 10 years, and they don't have to do much, and they're going to end up getting nuclear. I met with Bibi Netanyahu the other day. Believe me, he is not a happy camper.
All right, Mrs. Clinton, Secretary Clinton, you have 2 minutes.
Let me start by saying words matter. Words matter when you run for president, and they really matter when you are president. And I want to reassure our allies in Japan and South Korea and elsewhere that we have mutual defense treaties and we will honor them. It is essential that America's word be good. And so I know that this campaign has caused some questioning and some worries on the part of many leaders across the globe. I've talked with a number of them. But I want to, on behalf of myself, and I think on behalf of a majority of the American people, say that, our word is good. It's also important that we look at the entire global situation. There's no doubt that we have other problems with Iran, but personally, I'd rather deal with the other problems having put that lid on their nuclear program than still to be facing that. And Donald never tells you what he would do. Would he have started a war? Would he have bombed Iran? If he's going to criticize a deal that has been very successful in giving us access to Iranian facilities that we never had before, then he should tell us what his alternative would be. But it's like his plan to defeat ISIS. He says it's a secret plan, but the only secret is that he has no plan. So we need to be more precise in how we talk about these issues. People around the world follow our presidential campaigns so closely, trying to get hints about what we will do. Can they rely on us? Are we going to lead the world with strength and in accordance with our values? That's what I intend to do. I intend to be a leader of our country that people can count on, both here at home and around the world. To make decisions that will further peace and prosperity, but also stand up to bullies, whether they're abroad or at home. We cannot let those who would try to destabilize the world, to interfere with American interests and security, to be given any opportunities at all.
Is expired.
Let's do one thing I'd like to say.
Very quickly.
I will go very quickly, but I will tell you that Hillary will tell you to go to her website and read all about how to defeat ISIS, which she could have defeated by never having it, get going in the first place. Right now, it's getting tougher and tougher to defeat them because they're in more and more places, more and more states, more and more nations.
Mr. Trump.
And it's a big problem. And as far as Japan is concerned, I want to help all of our allies. But we are losing billions and billions of dollars. We cannot be the policeman of the world. We cannot protect countries all over the world where they're not paying us what we need.
We have just a few final questions.
She doesn't say that because she's got no business ability. We need heart. We need a lot of things, but you have to have some basic ability. And sadly, she doesn't have that. All of the things that she's talking about could have been taken care of during the last 10 years, let's say, while she had great power, but they weren't taken care of. And if she ever wins this race, they won't be taken care of.
Mr. Trump, this year, Secretary Clinton became the first woman nominated for president by a major party. Earlier this month, you said she doesn't have, quote, a presidential look. She's standing here right now. What did you mean by that?
She doesn't have the look. She doesn't have the stamina. I said she doesn't have the stamina. And I don't believe she does have the stamina. To be president of this country, you need tremendous stamina.
The quote was, I just don't think she has a presidential look.
Wait a minute, unless you asked me a question. Did you ask me a question? You have to be able to negotiate our trade deals. You have to be able to negotiate, that's right, with Japan, with Saudi Arabia. I mean, can you imagine we're defending Saudi Arabia, and with all of the money they have, we're defending them and they're not paying? All you have to do is speak to them. Wait, you have so many different things you have to be able to do, and I don't believe that Hillary has the stamina.
Let's let her respond.
Well, as soon as he travels to 112 countries and negotiates a peace deal, a ceasefire, a release of dissidents, an opening of new opportunities in nations around the world, or even spends 11 hours testifying in front of a congressional committee, he can talk to me about stamina.
The world, let me tell you, Hillary has experience, but it's bad experience. We have made so many bad deals during the last, so she's got experience, that I agree, but it's bad experience. Whether it's the Iran deal that you're so in love with, where we gave them $150 billion back, whether it's the Iran deal, whether it's anything you can name, you almost can't name a good deal. I agree. She's got experience, but it's bad experience. And this country can't afford to have another 4 years of that kind of experience.
We are at the final question.
One thing,
very
Lester,
quickly,
is,
we're at the
you
final
know,
question
he
now.
tried to switch from looks to stamina. But this is a man who has called women pigs, slobs, and dogs, and someone who has said pregnancy is an inconvenience to employers, who has said women don't deserve equal pay unless they do as good a job as men. And one of the worst things he said was about a woman in a beauty contest. He loves beauty contests, supporting them and hanging around them. And he called this woman Miss Piggy. Then he called her Miss Housekeeping because she was Latina. Donald, she has a name.
Where did you find
her
this?
name
Where
is
did you find
Alicia
this?
Machado.
Where did you find
and
it?
she has become a U.S. citizen, and you can bet she's going to vote this November.
Okay, good. Let me just tell you.
Mr. Trump, we'll take 10 seconds, and then we're going to have the final question.
Hillary is hitting me with tremendous commercials. Some of it said in entertainment. Some of it said somebody who's been very vicious to me, Rosie O'Donnell. I said very tough things to her, and I think everybody would agree that she deserves it, and nobody feels sorry for her. But you want to know the truth? I was going to say something extremely rough to Hillary, to her family, and I said to myself, I can't do it. I just can't do it. It's inappropriate. It's not nice. But she spent hundreds of millions of dollars on negative ads on me, many of which are absolutely untrue. They're untrue and they're misrepresentations. And I will tell you this, Lester, it's not nice, and I don't deserve that. But it's certainly not a nice thing that she's done. It's hundreds of millions of ads, and the only gratifying thing is I saw the polls come in today, and with all of that money, over $200 million is spent, and I'm either winning or tied, and I've spent practically nothing.
One of you will not win this election. So my final question to you tonight, are you willing to accept the outcome as the will of the voters? Secretary Clinton?
Well, I support our democracy. And sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But I certainly will support the outcome of this election. And I know Donald's trying very hard to plant doubts about it, but I hope the people out there understand this election's really up to you. It's not about us so much as it is about you and your families and the kind of country and future you want. So I sure hope you will get out and vote as though your future depended on it, because I think it does.
Mr. Trump, very quickly, the same question. Will you accept the outcome as the will of the voters?
I want to make America great again. We are a nation that is seriously troubled. We're losing our jobs. People are pouring into our country. The other day, we were deporting 800 people, and perhaps they passed the wrong button, they pressed the wrong button, or perhaps, worse than that, it was corruption. We were, for good reason, ended up becoming citizens. Ended up becoming 800, and now it turns. I want to make America great again. I'm going to be able to do it. I don't believe Hillary will. The answer is, if she wins, I will absolutely support her.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for us. That concludes our debate for this evening. A spirited one. We covered a lot of ground, not everything, as I suspected we would. The next presidential debates are scheduled for October 9th at Washington University in St. Louis and October 19th at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. The conversation will continue. A reminder, the vice presidential debate is scheduled for October 4th at Longwood University in Farmville, Virginia. My thanks to Hillary Clinton and to Donald Trump and to Hofstra University for hosting us tonight. Good night, everyone.
And there you have it. Now, the very first official presidential debate between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump is now over, moderated, of course, by NBC's Lester Holt. They covered a range of topics we expected they would: the economy, national security, tax returns, emails, race relations, the birther movement, ISIS. It all came up. There's a lot to get through. There are a lot of fact checks. Stay with us here. We're going to try to get through as many as we can and, of course, bring you a live look from inside the spin room as well.
Interesting to watch this tableau on stage as the two families gather, as if the other clan wasn't there. You get the Trump family debriefing, and then the Clinton family on the other side of the stage.